All right, if you want to skip right to the interview, go to about 8 minutes. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 43 of the podcast. I have a pretty cool guest on today, KLees Marks. He was somebody I'd reach out to just through a Facebook group for podcasting. I was asking for people to help me clip up some of the episodes that we've already done and release them, a little 5-minute, 1-minute clips out there so people that are a bit intimidated by a 3-hour length can see kind of what we're talking about and get a little bit of a taste. And he said, hey, I have a company that kind of does that stuff. And we did a little, it was supposed to be a 20-minute Zoom call, and I think we talked for almost an hour, just kind of bullshit, and it was interesting to talk to someone that, clearly has a passion for podcasting and for the medium. So went through a little bit of talking with him and got it to the point where I was wanting to, invest a little money in his services and what he could do for me, but I don't like getting into business with people unless I know them. Especially around something like this podcast where I care so much about it and it's so close to my heart that I don't really want anybody in that doesn't really understand my vision. So I kind of went out on a limb after and asked if he'd be willing to come on my podcast and just let me get to know him a little bit in long form. Like I've said a million times on this podcast, I think it's very easy for people to hide who they are if you're talking to them for 5, 10, 15 minutes even. I think this is why you don't really get a sense of people when they're on TV for a million other reasons, but that's one of the important ones. So to have that long form opportunity to sit down with KLees and really pick his brain and see where he's coming from. And I really learned a ton from him. There was a couple really spicy ideas I got out of this that I'm already working on in the background to bring to fruition. And this would all be worth it just for that. So probably be doing a little bit more business in the future with KLees. But I think if anybody's looking to start a podcast, well, if you know me, contact me. But if you don't and you don't know me from Adam, I think KLees would be a great way to start. I mean, even if you wanted to contact me, I'd probably put you in touch with KLees if lined up for what you need is kind of what they serve. I would definitely push you their way. I think it's an awesome service. I think we're going to be seeing more of this starting out in the future because podcasts are such a powerful tool. And I think there's so many people that would be amazing at it and have the right voice, but so much of the bottlenecking and the gates that stand in front of it is just technical. And just if you have somebody that has a little bit of knowledge on that side, so many more people could get access to amplify their voice and then in turn amplify the voices of those people that they deem fit, kind of like what I'm trying to do here. So it was a really fun episode, even a little magic trick at the end. Hopefully the video will be up for this soon because it'll be a little bit hard to follow the trick just by audio. I didn't know he was a magician. I didn't know he could do magic, so it was kind of a surprise to me. I think if you listen or watch, you'll kind of get to watch my surprise. I didn't know. I wanted to make sure I gave the right reaction, but didn't overreact too soon. And I don't know. I think I got in a little bit in my own head around the time when he's doing the magic trick. So if you're going to the YouTube to watch it, you get magic and you get to watch me stand there like an idiot, not knowing what to say. So you get a double whammy there. So definitely, if the video's up, the reason I'm saying if is had to go back to using that program called Zencastr for this interview, just because Zoom, for some reason, we're getting some feedback on Zoom and it wasn't really working, which I had stopped using Zencastr because of this issue, but I had hoped I had it sorted out and just kind of took a shot at it. But the issue came back with a vengeance on this episode. Our audios were so out of sync. I just spent the last hour sitting here trying to edit it to make it sound decent enough and getting it back lined up so that we're on the right timing. But it's so funny with how often I give little oh yeah, for sure in this podcast. It makes it hard to line up because I could be saying that to so many different things in a sentence that you really have to find a good time where we're both talking or where it overlaps to really find where it is. And sometimes I'll think I have it lined up and then I realize I'm like a whole 10 seconds off. Oh yeah. Anyways, that's just me bitching about the editing process. So, just what I'm worried about is that now that I've messed around in this so much with the audio to try and make it line up, it might be impossible to line that back up to the video. So if you're listening to this, Brendan, I apologize. And if you can't do it, it's all good. I think the listeners will understand if there is no video for this one. And, but hopefully we can make it happen because I think that magic trick, maybe we can even, if we can't, we'll definitely take the, that chunk and make it a clip of the magic trick and everything so you guys can experience that because I think that's the only part of this you'll really need the video for. But I think it's fun to watch a podcast too sometimes and just get it. And you can actually see me if you've gone on YouTube before and watched a podcast and you could only see a shadow of my face. I now have this nice lighting system so you can actually see me. So it should be a little bit of a step up in product on those terms. Like I say every week, if you want to help out with the podcast, I think this is a great episode to hear kind of more in my head about what that would be. And I think it's something that I'm really excited about. That's probably one of the things I'm most excited for is building this team and getting more people around to help spread the love of this vision and where I want to take it, and have more people jump on board and hopefully help me, and they can learn a few things along the way. But one of the biggest things you guys can do is help share some things on the social media. When you see the episodes get shared, that's a huge help. Telling somebody, passing it on to a friend is huge. And then just following the social medias, Instagram and Twitter for the VonDubCast. I've been tweeting a lot more, sharing the tweets over onto my Instagram stories a little bit just to try and drive traffic. I think we have one extra, I think from 14. Now we have 15 followers on Twitter. So let's effing go. Getting huge there. But that's about it. Really loving life right now. Got some really good episodes in the bank. Have one with my buddy Gonzo coming out next week for you guys. It's awesome. I got some really special ones lined up to record, and it's funny to feel the anxiety levels I know when I got some really good episodes in the can compared to when I'm stressed out about not having them. So it's definitely making me rethink my release schedule, making sure I maybe stay a little bit more ahead of the curve and not let myself get into that period where I'm stressing over it and really struggling to find a guest on a weekend when I need to be released on Monday. But anyways, that all comes with time and just kind of figuring things out. Just like any job, you figure it out as you go and you get more comfortable and you find out what you need out of it and how to prepare and all that kind of jazz. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy this episode. Might be a little bit inside baseball, but I think the passion for the subject will come through and really make it exciting. If sometimes just the genuine feel you get when you hang up after a podcast really tells the tale of if it's going to be good or not. And this one, I felt extremely confident. So I think you guys are going to really like this one. And trying to remember all the different things that I lined up before I started recording this intro that I wanted to cover. I always have about a list of 10 things. I talk about 3 of them, forget the rest of them, and I'm already at about 10 minutes. I'm like, fuck, that's too long of an intro already. But that's the way it goes. I'm learning on that too. I think I covered everything. As long as I told you guys to share it with your friends and follow social medias, I'm good. So a little bit of intro music, get you into the episode, and I'll see you guys in the outro. Bye. All right. Thanks for being here, KLees. It's an honor to have a fellow general in the podcast army kind of fighting this fight for such a good cause. It's nice to have you on. Thanks again.
Hey, Nick. It's great to be here with you and your audience. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. So Pod Farm. So can you maybe just give the listeners, like I said, I probably gave a little bit of an intro in the actual introduction, but maybe just to give people a little bit of an idea of what you guys do, can you maybe just break down for the listeners what Pod Farm is and what kind of services you guys provide?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the founder of Podcast Farm, and we do full service podcast production. I'm a podcast consultant, so I work with new podcasters and already established podcasters to either launch their show or grow their show. And, I've been involved in all parts of the podcasting world, from audio editing to just doing guest booking to just managing shows to consulting on the design and the launch of shows and the branding of it. So I've gotten to see kind of the full spectrum of things.
Okay, cool. And how many people are a part of your team over there?
So I work with different freelancers all over the world, actually. Okay. But we're a pretty focused team. Me and my partner do a lot of the video and like micro content editing, and I do the consulting, obviously. And then I have different editors that I'll work with on the actual podcast episodes. And, it's interesting because the podcast editing and the podcast host, they have this interesting relationship where you kind of want to have an editor that works with your style and you have a good relationship with, because you're going back and forth often. So I have different editors that I can kind of pair with the right client to make sure that they're getting a fit that works for their show.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that was when we first started talking. That was kind of one of the things that I wanted to, talk to you about was seeing that kind of aspect and seeing how that works, because that was something I thought, with the micro content, right, making clips and stuff, that was something right from the start of the podcast. I knew that was sooner or later I had to bring that into the fold if I was going to be a successful podcast. But my first thought was, if you just hire someone that doesn't know you, doesn't know your show, and is going to be trying to find, what the best clips out of a 3-hour podcast is, if they don't know you at all, how are they going to find that, and how do you build that relationship? So it's interesting to hear that you have that. And you're right, even apart from the micro content side of it, even with just editing and kind of knowing what you want, and especially branding, it's definitely something that would require a relationship. So that's interesting that you see that too, and that you tailor that with the services that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually interesting too, because you start to recognize people's vocal patterns and phrases as an editor.
Yeah.
And, editing someone's 10th or 20th episode will always be easier than their first episode, because you kind of learn how they speak, and you get the cadence of their words and where to cut out certain crutch phrases and stuff like that. So it's definitely interesting.
So then, in your opinion, I mean, and I think this is kind of something that is very opinion based, but in terms of editing, because I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and maybe just to give you a little bit more on me, I think we discussed this a little bit, but when I graduated from university, I got into a job where I was doing lots of data entry, and I was just looking for something to kind of fill the time, and I stumbled upon a podcast, and I listened to the first 100 episodes of that podcast that were available on YouTube, and then I dove into right after that, it was the first time I listened to Joe Rogan. I always kind of had a real hate on for him for no reason in my head, because in high school, all the potheads, I was a real anti-weed guy when I was in high school, and all the potheads would kind of use Joe Rogan. Well, Joe Rogan smokes weed, so I always was like, well, fuck Joe Rogan then. So I didn't like him, but I listened to one episode and was like, holy shit, this guy's actually got a head on his shoulders, and started listening more. And then for the next, I don't know, what is it, 2021, next 5 years since then, 6 years since then, I've listened to probably at least 10 to 50 podcasts a week, right? I listen to them on 2.5 times. It's pretty much all I do. And I really enjoy podcasts. So I get to see kind of all different types. I get to see ones start and fail, and see ones really gain success. And something that I've noticed is that there's multiple ways to do it. And in terms of editing, some people have highly edited. They don't have a lot of pauses, not a lot of, it's very cut and clean. And then there's some that, they don't even edit out the pee break. Somebody just keeps talking. And that's more of the style I took, because that was the ones that I enjoyed. But what do you think, maybe in your professional opinion, seeing so many, where do you think the pros and cons lie in terms of editing, or those two different styles, highly edited versus more the let her rip and see what kind of where it falls?
Yeah, that's a fun discussion. What I really like to focus on is helping people amplify what they love. Right. And the way that they do that is almost I think it is less important than why they're doing it. And so first, I would ask myself, how important to my brand and to my community is me sounding perfect versus natural? And I think there's a huge push on all levels for brands to be more human and to humanize the brand, right? Humanize the corporation. And so podcasts are great for that. I think there's a place for really pristine editorial style segments, where you have multiple speakers coming in and kind of like a This American Life, like that makes sense. But I think for many businesses and many, creators and founders and teachers, I think that honestly, raw, candid conversations can do a lot to build people's brand and business.
Right. Right. And that's something that I see too. I mean, you're definitely right on the money there with, there's time and a place for a really well cut, well produced podcast. But I think what I see as one of the main important factors of what a podcast is that authenticity, and that window into a genuine conversation that isn't politicized or produced as much. And I think leaving those little things in, I think a lot of the time throughout this process, I have a couple people that listen, right? My girlfriend and my sister listened to the episodes before, and there's are you sure you want to let that in, right? Or leave that in? And I always say, like, those are my favorite parts of podcasts. And that little thing that probably shouldn't have been left in just gets left in. And those little things really humanize it and bring people along for the journey. And I always thought that was important, but I think there is multiple different ways to do it. And that's something that I think is so cool about podcasts, is there is so many different ways to do it. Maybe this is probably a tough question, and maybe I can vamp for a bit to give you more time to answer it. But what do you think the most important piece of a podcast in terms of success is? Like, what do you think is that one, if you had to really drain it down to one thing, what do you think it is that makes a podcast successful versus lots of the ones we see that fail?
I think dedicated service to your tribe, to your community, to your listeners. I think that's the number one thing I've heard from all the top podcast hosts I've talked to, or influencers or brands, is just prioritizing like, if I want to talk to myself, I can go do that anywhere, but I'm talking to you, the listener, right now. And so I want to try and make sure that I'm trying to give you something value. And I think that, having great audio, having consistent schedule, having good branding, all that stuff is so important as well. But the core principle is simple, and it's just serve your audience and cultivate, a community around your show.
Right. Yeah. And that comes with that dedication. I think, for me, it's always authenticity. I think I've listened to a couple podcasts in the last couple of weeks where, it's funny how, and maybe this is thinking too highly of myself, but it feels like you can tell right from the first moment whether somebody is making a podcast to try and make money or gather some sort of fame, or if they really love it. And it seems to come through. I don't know what it is that tips you off to it, but you can hear it genuinely, right? And I think a lot of times people try and make up for that with the highly editing, with some nice music, some making it so professional that it seems like that it's very passionate, but it's very empty, right? And I feel like and a lot of time you see that with length, people doing 14-minute episodes with music underneath, just, cut and dry. They can do it in a weekend. They can record 20 episodes of a season, right? And then they release those over months looking like they're putting all this work in, and then they do it again. And to me, and not to say that those can't be successful. I think there's lots of very niche podcasts that are highly produced, like we said, that can bring something across. But it almost seems to me to be taking the old model of what TV shows used to be before they got kind of turned into the same crap that's on every channel. But if you take that model of kind of what people grew up with and then they push that into this market, and I think that can work. But where I see the real successes, right, the real Joe Rogans of it, they don't have any sort of form to it. They just go with what feels right to them and what they enjoy and follow their own passions and just let people feed off of that and recognize that and feel the authenticity in it. And that's what brings them forward. Do you ever have people approach you that you can tell that they're not in it for the right reasons? And do you still help those people? Because it's if they're willing to come to you and offer your services, who are you to say no? Or do you guys gate somehow who you bring on to work with in that sense of the word, even if you kind of know maybe they won't be in it for the long haul?
Totally. Yeah. I think, for Podcast Farm, the people I try and work with are going to be these interview style. For the people doing true crime or different formats, that is less where I focus, because I believe that the power of the interview is that you rapidly grow your network beyond what you thought was possible, and you get in touch with. I was listening to one of your podcasts where you talked to some of your favorite authors, right?
The Coleman brothers. Yeah.
So it was so cool to be with you in that moment of meeting people that you had, gotten immersed in their story. And so that's one of my favorite things about podcasting. So I try and work with people who want to work within that realm of getting guest speakers on. And so when someone's not a good fit, I have free resources. So Podcast Farm is a community for all podcasters. Doesn't matter what your genre is. We have a Facebook group and stuff, and I have different free resources online that I'll give people at any stage. I only work with people who I feel like I can help, and I can help them get to the next place.
And so that would usually be, like we did, hopping on a quick Zoom call and kind of just getting to know them quickly, whether that's 20 minutes to an hour, just kind of seeing what what got them into it and what kind of things they hope to get out of it. And that lets if you can help them or not, I would imagine. Hey.
Yeah, you got it. It's like learning kind of why people are doing it and what the motivations are and what the problems are, and really kind of helping them find clarity in that 30 minutes or whatever, so that we can see if it's a good fit to try and work together. Yeah,
for sure. And just going back to that Coleman Brothers episode, that was one for me where I was very surprised that they had said yes. I mean, I figured for sure I have this thing in my head where all these people that I want to have on, I know I will have them on one day. I just have a supreme belief that it will happen, and I'm going to make it happen. It's just in my head, the timeline's a little bit different, right? It's going to be, you know, maybe this is years ahead, but then to have somebody like the Coen brothers on that early, I was thinking, like, in my head, I was having the struggle of, oh, I know this is going to be amazing for me. I'm going to have so much fun doing this. I just don't know how much it's going to come across, because I don't know how many people have read these books. They're not, you know, it's not J.K. Rowling by any means, but the content that they put out was so strong, and I believe in it so much that I'm fully confident that, you know, each year that series is going to get bigger and bigger, and, you know, eventually it'll be put into a movie or a TV show, and then people are going to look back and find that this series that means so much to them has this accompanying 3-hour in-depth resource with the authors. And I hope to have them on again, because I think I was so worried about spoilers in that first episode that I think eventually, maybe down the road, if I could have them back, hopefully in person, and really say, okay, everybody, this is your one shot at the start. There's going to be spoilers in this, and then go really down to the well. Yeah. I find that when I could find that in something else, I mean, just keeping with the authors, there's books I've read, like the Aragon series, and it was a younger author, Paolini. I think he wrote the first ones when he was under 18. And I always loved the books, and I always wanted more. And then once in a while, I'd stumble across, he would do a podcast. And though that hour with him of getting to hear his in-depth thoughts, because it was something so personable, it's so next level. I feel like it's something, it's hard to explain to people the difference for podcast fans versus any other type of fans. I feel like it's such an intimate medium that, you know, you have a podcast that has 100,000 fans, right? And you have a TV show that gets, you know, 500,000 viewers. That's a very different thing. I would take those 100,000 podcast fans over 1 million viewers, right? It's a very different thing, right? When a podcaster brings on a new advertiser and actually, you know, tells his people, this is a good product, you're going to buy it. They actually see sales spike, and they see an actual impact where, you know, you advertise for a 30-second spot in between a hockey game. You are blasting out to way more people, but you're not really getting much response, right? It's interesting. It's
you said so many great things in there. One thing that stood out is, like, you know, you're saying you kind of had this conflict of, is my interest in these authors going to translate for my audience, or do I just have so much context about their book and stuff that I'm just going to love it and no one else is? But, you know, Skrillex actually said, you know, Skrillex, the dubstep superstar, he said there's something really intriguing about someone getting on stage, because, you know, and I come from a music background, electronic music and touring, and like often we're not doing that much. We're mixing some songs, maybe we're mixing some parts, maybe we're playing some things over electronic tracks, but it's our energy on stage and it's us having a blast. And Skrillex is like, watching someone have fun on stage, having the time of their life is really fun for the crowd. And so I think people want to be a fly on the wall. So with these Joe Rogan episodes or Aubrey Marcus or any of that style of just candid interview, it's like you get to be friends with all these cool people in a somewhat casual way and see them having a great time. And I think that's what people want, is to see other humans having an amazing time.
Yeah. And for so long, I think celebrity was so gated that the times that you did see them, there was all those walls up and you never really got to see them down. I think one of the biggest things or the biggest examples of this point that we're both trying to make here is Matthew McConaughey. Just lately, he was, you know, A-list actor, you know, huge superstar. Everybody knows who he is, but nobody knows him at all. And then he's done, I don't know, a run of maybe 10 podcasts in the last 6 months, and
with all the biggest hosts.
With all the biggest people, but he was so willing to let his barriers down and be truly honest with who he was. And I'm a huge fan of him now, right? Like, I always liked his movies, but there's not a movie that he's going to be in that I'm not going to see now, because I got to see that intimate side of him and what goes into his process. And that's something that it seems like it's so obvious that it surprised me people aren't waking up to this, right? Like things like that, or things like in hockey, I'm Canadian, you know, hockey is a big market here and it's a big overarching thing all across Canada. But now there's been a podcast, the Spit and Chicklets podcast with the Barstool Network, that has almost become bigger than the game. You know, it's so popular. People are so diehard for it. People love it so much. And it's changed everything. People have so much more intimate. It's changing the relationship of how hockey players, it's giving a whole different path with how hockey players can relate with the media, because it used to be very much they would give cookie cutter answers. It was you get way less of an answer out of a hockey player than any other sport. And now it's showing this new door, but it seems like people, as much as they're cashing in on it where they can, they're not realizing the full scope of it. Same with Joe Rogan. I mean, until he got that $100 million deal with Spotify, people didn't really recognize the power of it, except him. You know, he was already doing things years ago that I said was so smart when he stopped putting out his episodes live so that he could, you know, buy equity in these companies that he was talking about and certain things like this, and has a small group around him that he says, you know, hey, I talked about Traeger grills on this podcast. They're about to blow up. Go invest into it, and only helps out his crew. Like shit like that is just so much further, and the power that gives him is so much greater than what people see it as. You know, they recognize the numbers sometimes, and people say, yeah, he gets a lot of listeners, but that is completely different, and people really aren't understanding the full breadth of what that is.
Yeah, I mean, if we look even back 50, 60 years, like around the 60s, we'll just take radio. You have to be, it's so controlled. It's so hard to get into. It's so costly.
Yep.
You know, they're protecting what goes out on the airwaves. We have this back door of just like turning on our phone and broadcasting to the entire planet. This power, it's a power. It's a power. There's responsibility that comes with it, obviously. Yeah. And I think like what you're saying there is building your own, your own insulated economy and your own insulated community and network is such a smart move, and not keep investing in these other people's platforms like Facebook, like Instagram, like, you know, all these social media networks are great. They're useful. Use them, but your podcast is yours, and no one else is really in between you. And that's what's so cool about it.
Right. And I think this all started, I mean, in my head, I'm sure it started somewhere before this. Every idea always starts before you think it did. But kind of when YouTube came on the scene, you saw those first big YouTubers come on, right? This was before podcasting got huge. And it was these people that had, like you say, their own, they built it up. They owe nobody anything except, I guess, YouTube. They're kind of dependent on them. But I mean, they're in the same business. What's good for a big star YouTuber is good for YouTube, right? It keeps eyes on their platform. But you started to see them grow this, and then people would be so blown away by what they were able to achieve completely on their own. And then it started going into, it almost seemed like the next step was the streamers and the video game guys. And then they kind of learned this lesson and took it and grew it. And then, I mean, podcast was the next step. And now those are all the same thing to me. It's long form, intimate content, right? I'm trying to my fans, I'm trying to always break it down to something, you know, if it's something that someone's clearly very passionate about and there's less than 5 people with their hands in the pie, those are the things that you look for if you want truth and honesty and you want it not to be corrupted by all these other, you know, money and all this stuff. That's what you got to look for. And I'm trying to provide like easily digestible ways for people to seek out this type of content, because it clearly is showing by the numbers to be better than all the rest. But people say, well, how am I going to find it? How did you find these Joe Rogans and these Lex Friedman? Because those aren't really, you know, matching up with me. Those aren't the guys I like, but how do I find my Joe Rogans and my Lex Friedmans? And that's what I'm trying to figure out with that. That's what I've got so far. Someone that's clearly passionate about it. There's not very many people involved to stick their hands and get their say into it. And I don't know what else I can add to it. Maybe, do you understand the kind of the concept of what type of media I'm talking about? Any other ways that people can look for that type of stuff that would be a, or even red flags the other way when you see it, right? Like as soon as it's on a network where there's producers, like that's a automatic red flag to me that is not the artist's true work coming through. That it's going through a couple filters before it gets to you, and that's what
complaint with Joe Rogan, right? After he moved to Spotify, a lot of people are like, he's changed and stuff. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I agree with that personally,
right?
But you know, now we see Spotify ads with his name. Personally, I think I congratulate him and think that it's awesome that he's showing the world the power of the platform. And you know what you're saying is so interesting about long form content and YouTube in the day and the streamers and the video gamers and stuff. And I think I've really started to think about YouTube as the video podcast platform, right? That is what it is. And it's interesting, on my iPhone, it has a time spent app, which it helps you not, be on the phone too much. The cool thing is you can limit certain kinds of apps. So I limit social media apps. I only do give myself 25 minutes a day on it. YouTube is not locked by that. And I think that's a super interesting thing from Apple, that they chose not to lock YouTube, just like they don't lock the podcast app, because they're not social media networking apps. They are, they're educational, they're content consuming, and there's something different going on YouTube than there is on Facebook. It's just different.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely see that.
And then To your point about finding I really like this idea of like, there are these really amazing people out there having real conversations, like you said, that are uncorrupted or
Tainted. Yeah.
unmeddled with by,
Yeah.
untainted. It's pure. Podcasting in many ways can still be pure. And so like, how do you find that? I don't think there's a shortcut, but part of my mission is to help podcasters broadcast themselves better and more clearly and align their messaging with that kind of audience so that the two can connect. So you're saying, okay, maybe Lex isn't my kind of guy, Lex Friedman, or maybe Joe isn't my kind of guy, but who is someone who talks about these kinds of topics? I want to build my own community of podcasters and supporting each other and sharing so that people can find their, show of choice and the topics.
Yeah. And then another one kind of in that same vein of what I've been telling people too is find something that you're passionate about. Like, what is it that you're passionate about? If it's hockey, then take that and then look up top hockey podcasts, top hockey YouTube channels, top hockey streamers, right? Look in those three areas, try and find something, maybe look at a little bit of their content, right? I'm just using hockey as an example. It could be knitting. It could be anything there's a podcast for everything. There's a YouTube channel for everything. And in those, you might have to do a little bit of searching there, but in under 2 weeks, you can find someone you really connect with that is going to be giving you weekly content that is specific to them. You can develop a relationship and it's going to be much better than any TV show you want because you went and seeked it out yourself. It wasn't just what was put onto your TV in front of you, which is also the next red flag. If they're trying to shove it in front of your face and you can't just go find it on your own, it's probably not going to be exactly what you're after. Right. So I think that's another way that I've been trying to direct people when they ask me of how to kind of find these avenues to find that kind of content that they want, just like I have. Cause I think a lot of time they see how passionate I guess I am about lots of these people. And they go, well, where's my Joe Rogan? Right. Well, I'll try, and as much as I can, I will try to give you the tools to find your own, right. And to get there. But maybe something I can ask you, this is kind of one of the first questions I was going to ask, but like you say, the conversation always goes where it goes. But, just your personal favorite podcasts. What are the ones that you listen to? Who are your favorites?
Yeah, totally. One, I think hands down, one of my, like, the biggest influence to me in podcasting is this show called the Relationship School Podcast. It used to be called the Smart Couple podcast, but it's the Relationship School Podcast, and it's the host is Jason Gaddis, and he's a relationship coach and amazing educator. He teaches people how to do conflict well. He teaches couples how to do relationship parenting, and it's based around like the latest in relationship science, in brain science, in attachment theory, in psychology, and he brings on all the experts in the world about relationships. And Gabor Mate and Stan Tatkin and Dan Siegel and just so many people. He brings a ton of people on, and that show was really impactful for me in my life and still is. But also the whole way that he did the intro and the editing and all that stuff really informed how I like my podcast, like how I like value first and very actionable. It's very conversational and real. And he has a whole school behind him and courses and programs and coaches and stuff. So I love that as an example. But then another great podcast is it's called This Jungian Life, and my cousin, who has another also great podcast called the Synchrosoma podcast, she
like Carl
Jung to it. It's a Jungian psychology conversation. Yeah, Carl Jung, 3 different analysts discussing different big topics, and they'll just like whatever the topic is, and then they sort of jam on it, and it's very free flowing. And then they interpret a dream in every episode from one of the listeners. Yeah. And that's really fun to listen to their dream interpretation. And it's like educational, and it's always relevant. And because it's Jungian psychology, it's very archetypal. So it's like very universal principles and
that's awesome. And then maybe to bring it back from before the podcast, we had already talked a little bit about kind of your music journey, and I'm just curious, how did that start, and kind of how did that process go, and where did it take you, and then maybe give us a little bit of insight on what that transformation from the music world into the podcast world looked like, and kind of what brought you to it, and maybe how did you handle that? Because I know lots of times with goals, even if you find something you really like this, it's hard to give up something if you were passionate about it before. Those transitions can be painful, even if it's from one good thing to another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. That's very true. So my background is in audio engineering and music, and I've been in that for about 15 years. Love the studio. My father bought this drum set where you could put any sounds you want on it. And from that moment on, I was kind of hooked.
Yeah.
So playing with sound, recording sound, spending a lot of time with audio files from a young age, just like learning how to work with sound and being really interested in collecting different sounds from out in nature and putting them together and trying to make rhythms out of them and things like that. And I had a record label in Mexico, and I got really interested in electronic music and working with community and working with more of like a label and a cooperative label. So everyone's participating. It's not so much this old model of like the label rips off the artist. It's more of like, hey, we are the label. Let's put out great music and do great things with it. And over time, that transitioned into me starting this electronic duo called Baseline Drift. And that sort of catapulted us into this deal with this local record label here called Gravitas Recordings, which was founded by Jesse Breda, who is a mentor and dear friend of mine. They're an incredible organization. They've put out so many amazing albums and supported so many artists all over the world. So they really helped me take my like few songs I had done with the singer, Rachel Sink Lindsay, and they helped just promote us and share us. And eventually I started working with them and learning a lot about the ropes about marketing and promotion. And, the podcast sphere and space is so similar to the music industry in the sense that, like, you're this artist, you have this album, you have to do the same release strategies. You have to do so many similar things. You're dealing with audio. It's just a hair off from recording an album. Right. Yeah. And so I felt like it was very translatable to move into this. And it is a specific technical skill set to handle only dialogue and stuff like that. But I think working for the label, I worked in licensing and sync. So I dealt with trying to get music on TV shows, and I had some of my music featured on the Killjoys on the Sci-Fi Channel, and did a original composition with my music partner for Robin Wright short film. So it's like
cool.
All this stuff started to kind of swirl together. I was touring and opening up for my heroes, and I just got tired of moving around the country, honestly, like going all over. And it was a lot of money and effort to do that. And I kind of wanted to be more grounded and stable in one place. So I started teaching electronic music, and that's kind of where I started editing more podcasts and doing other work. And over time, it just more launching more shows, learning what people really need. I realized, and then of course, COVID really accelerated everything. We're all stuck at home.
Right.
I realized people needed to change their mindset. They needed to build business infrastructure. They needed to understand like principles and workflows and have templates to launch podcasts. Not just, if I just edit their show, it doesn't help them as much as if I help them build a system to make their message as accessible as possible to everyone all over the place. I'm going to just stop my camera real quick before you ask that question.
Yeah, right? For sure. I'll write it down so I don't forget it.
So will this stay in or will this be out?
No, I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see everybody.
I gotta keep you guessing a little bit. Totally. Now I said I was going to write it down. I didn't write it down, assuming I'd remember. Now I forgot my question. Oh no, I remember it. So it sounds like a lot of the business side of what you're doing now with the podcast was kind of brought in on that musical journey of kind of how to produce it and how similar it is. Was that kind of the only actual training in terms of the business side that you had when you were going into starting the podcast farm? And also kind of another question, at what point, how long have you been doing this kind of podcast industry stuff? I'm not even sure if you started before you started podcast farm, if you're kind of doing it freelance, but how long now have you been working in the podcast space?
Yeah. So even back in when I started my own label, I was doing dialogue editing and audiobooks, and I wasn't managing people's podcasts, but I was still like editing different different
Right.
episodes and things like that. So I've been aware of it for quite a bit, but it, back then it just didn't have the yeah, the
Gravitas.
gravitas is a great word. It didn't have the
Yeah.
gravitas that it seems to have now, and so it
Yeah.
didn't really enter into my realm of focus. I
Right.
actually worked as the visual communications coordinator for a nonprofit in Mexico. So I've been working with
Okay.
nonprofits and video production companies that they were bringing independent films from China and releasing them through Amazon on straight onto DVD. This was back in like 2009.
Okay.
So I've been working with different businesses and design marketing companies and organizations
Mhm.
to broadcast their message through email, through video, through certain kinds of audio formats. And what really got me interested in podcasting was a friend connected me with a client who needed just very consistent editing work, and that's kind of what
Mhm.
launched everything. And then I slowly started to get more interested. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now,
Mhm.
and the sort of like marketing, video, and branding stuff that's been about 8 or 9 years, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then in that time, how many podcasts do you think you've helped in turn, like the big help of kind of helping them brand everything, and just in terms of helping them do even the small edits and micro content, how many podcasts do you think you've worked with in that time?
Um, I think, counting all the different like odd consulting gigs and
Yeah.
editing and
Yeah.
micro content, maybe
Yeah.
like 30 or so different shows or brands. And
Yeah.
um, I think last year I was trying to calculate all the totally. I think I worked on like a few hundred episodes for different, combining everyone's together.
Right.
And what's really interesting about that is I get to see so many different people go through the same process, and
Yeah.
it gives me this overhead view. When I was just an editor, and this is really what made me launch my own show, is when I was just an editor for podcasts, I had no idea what the host was going through.
Right.
What you're doing
Right.
here, managing the whole process and keeping your guest feeling welcomed, and managing the interview questions and the technology and all the coordination, like there's no way to really know that. So
Yeah.
once I did my own show and launched other people's show and kind of went through their launch process with them, that
Mhm.
really changed things for me to understand just what it's like to be on this side of the mic versus just editing
Right.
audio.
And had you helped launch any shows before you had launched your own?
Yeah. Yeah, I had
And
launched a lot of shows before my own.
right. So then how eye-opening was the process of launching your own to maybe what you learned or maybe were missing in the ones previous to that?
Mhm. Well, I think the thing that hit the hardest first was imposter syndrome, which is funny because
For
it's
sure.
like,
I have that written down as another
yeah,
question
yeah,
here.
imposter syndrome is so real, and it's one of my main messages I
Yeah.
try and talk to people about, which is like,
Me
you're
too.
not an imposter, you're a podcaster. You're not an imposter.
Yeah.
Everyone has a right to share their message.
Mhm.
And I feel like still that inner voice. So actually, one of the first things I do with people in my program when I'm working to take them from podcast idea to having their podcast out on all platforms is to
Mhm.
just discuss the mindset piece, like what to expect, how slow growth can be, not to get
Mhm.
hopes up to be like, oh, I'm going to be an overnight sensation, but like, I'm in this for 3 years. I'm in this because I love it. I'm in this because I want to
Yeah.
serve people. Yes, I would love to build revenue around it, and all that is part of my program. We figure out how to do that, but the core and the heart has to be, I'm in it. So when I launched mine, I already knew what to expect, and I did it for a really particular reason, because I wanted to bring the best podcast hosts onto my show, and not just podcast hosts, but influencers and teachers and
Mhm.
just anyone who is broadcasting their message in a big way. Wanted to bring their expertise onto the show and share that. So for me, it was like I got to use all the best practices from my clients, see what worked for some people and didn't, and kind of put together my launch plan, which was really fun. It's been so inspiring, honestly, just to share inspiring conversations with others, that from also, like, I've gotten to interview a couple of my heroes on it, and that is a feeling. It was actually something I wanted to ask you about, because not everyone knows that they can
Yeah.
talk to their heroes, right? Not everyone actually goes through that
Mhm.
experience and knows that
Yeah.
to be true. And so I'm wondering, like, before you talk to the brothers of
Mhm.
your favorite book, had you met some of your heroes before, or was that like one of your first really
Yeah.
big heroes, or had you already
Like
known they could
I've
do that?
been, I'm a very lucky guy. I'm very blessed, very privileged with lots of the things I got to experience growing up. My family, the experiences that I got to go through, and in some of my heroes, I got to go down after some hockey games and, get the handshake, get the pictures as a kid with lots of the hockey players and stuff. And that was always amazing. And I got to, go to lots of concerts. And I never wanted for a lot of everything. But the difference that I found was it's never on the intimate level. It's never, every time I'd ever met one of my heroes, if you want to just use those terms, it was always in the sense of, it was short and it was always very clear that they were up here, you're down here. Whatever you get is great, right? As soon as you get somebody to agree to
Mhm.
come on and have a conversation is always one to one, right? It's very hard to hold over someone,
Mhm.
maybe in a 5-minute conversation, but if you're going over an hour, 2 hours, it is definitely a back and forth. And to be on the same level as them and to, make them laugh and to, you know, say something that you can tell really hits home with them and to interact with a hero is much different than, meeting a hero. And I think that was the experience. I don't
Mhm.
know how ready I was for that. I don't know how prepared, because in my head, a big part of starting this podcast selfishly was that exact reason of I would always be so jealous of Joe Rogan having all these scientists on that I would want to talk to. I was jealous and jealous and jealous. And then, I woke up one day and said, you can do that too. It's going to take longer. And, like Joe Rogan wasn't talking to these scientists 3 years into his podcast, it was further down the road. So I thought, oh, these authors and these scientists and these comedians that I want to talk to, it'll just be down the road. But then to have like the Coen brothers have that workout that early, right? And it was kind of a lesson to take those swings, because I think at the very start I was taking some swings that weren't connecting, and it kind of, made me a little bit hesitant to reach out to people of a certain stature, and was kind of really making me measure the swings I was taking. And actually what happened with the brothers was I did my first episode in a real podcast studio in person with cameras, and the lifting of that imposter syndrome for that whole week after, of how good I felt after getting a real episode recorded in a real studio and kind of getting a taste of what it could be like in the future. I was riding high, and that's when I was throwing those lines out to the Coen brothers, to all these guys. I feel for this week, I feel really professional. I'm going to act like it. And it paid dividends, right? Like I got that episode, and that's still
Wow.
one of my favorite episodes that I've had to date was that. So yeah, no, definitely. I don't even, I've already forgot what the question was. I think it was something about a hero, but man,
Yeah, no, but I mean, I love that you took those big swings. And part of my podcast blueprint is I intentionally ask my clients to think of 5
yeah.
unreachable guests, and to have 5 unreachable guests on their
Mhm.
master guest list, because oftentimes you'd be surprised who's willing to interview. Yeah, like maybe some huge
Mhm.
government official, maybe that's not possible, but you'd be surprised. And even if they don't say yes the first time, you tried, you can follow up in the future, they can see you're
Yeah.
still at it. There's so many benefits to trying. The worst thing is you get no response, or they
Yeah.
say no, and I feel like the fact that you did that and took that risk is great for your audience, because we got this awesome. And I love that conversation, by the way, because he breaks down capitalism and socialism in a really
Yeah.
interesting way in the middle of it, and I was really
Yeah,
fascinated by that.
their story writing and the concepts that they can come up with are so I think I said that to them, but just sometimes the worlds they create, you don't even need to keep reading. You can almost just put the book down, and just they've created such a wealth of interesting topics with a
Mm.
world that they've created that you can just think through on your own, right? It's almost like the story is not confined to the pages that they wrote. They create something so expansive, right, that you can really walk through it on your own and think of it. I mean, I was specifically for that series of the world they created. I even to this day, even after that interview, I keep thinking of, oh, how would that work in that universe, right? Like how would they have handled this? How would they have handled this? Which is so cool. I haven't taken advantage of it yet, but just the thought that if one of those things twigs me enough, I could pick up my phone and message those guys and ask them about it. Just still to this moment blows my mind, right? And it's just such a cool experience, right? And to be able to, my sister was the one that actually brought those books to me, right? And she had loved them too. And to be able to text her and say, holy shit, I'm going to interview the Coen brothers, and have her say, holy shit, you're interviewing, like, right? It's just that experience of the whole thing surrounding it. The interview itself, it was just so special. And so, I'll have that forever, right? And I hope to have many more of that's that occasion exactly, right, of having more of that going forward. But just to have it once, even if and we can no longer do them or whatever reason, I'm trying to think of something silly because I don't think there's anything short of that would stop me from doing this going forward. But it'd all be worth it just for that one interview, right? And just yeah.
That's the thing, man, is like starting a podcast gives you this, at least right now, like maybe everything changes and it becomes like a cheap thing and no one answers your guest request emails, but for now there's only 800, this is estimate, there's like 850,000 active podcasts, there's like 37 million YouTube video channels, so that's how small the podcasting world still is. And getting in now, working to interview experts, mentors, and heroes. And I use the word heroes because this is a great chance to talk to the people on the planet that you may never get again. You may never get the chance to set up a microphone, interview 20 to 50 people, and then you have this proof, this credential.
Exactly.
Like, hey,
and that's
come on my platform.
And that's something too. I mean, definitely on a grander sense of things, everybody wants to be remembered after they're gone. And I think that's also a piece of something when you see podcasts where you get people that intimately linked to your life, that is something that's going to live. And then there's proof of it, right? Like, hundreds of years later, somebody could be listening to Joe Rogan and they would have a very well documented of exactly who that person is to that core, because, you could be an actor and have, thousands of hours of you on film reading other people's words and people still don't know who you are. You're there, but they don't know who you are. Whereas podcasting is the first intimate form that is going to let people write. Like it used to be back in the day, people would read, be so prolific with their work, like philosophers and stuff that because they were so prolific and they put down their specific stamp of how they view the world, their worldview into these books. And that's what carried forward. And now you can see who these people are, right? But there's very few of them because it was so gated. You had to be a good writer. You had to have a brilliant mind to have people come on board. But now I think everybody's lives are interesting. You needed to be that interesting to be remembered back then. But now there's a whole other thing. It's maybe to be remembered, you need to be that interesting, but to be heard, you don't. Just being willing to be authentic and open with people will bring on, at least to a smaller level, some degree of allowing you to live on, right? And I think that's very cool to me. I don't know how often other podcasters think of it in those terms. I don't think, at least consciously, I think probably subconsciously, that's definitely a goal of everybody. That's kind of one of those human drives that drives everybody, whether they know it or not, is that, wanting to be remembered and wanting to live on, whether it's through their kids or through their work or whatever it is, right? So conscious of than other people, but it's definitely yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it makes me think of like a time capsule, right? And if it has video, like in this case, you get this record of humans interacting. People watch this in the future, and it's not manipulated by the media channels. It's not. But it's given thought. You put thought into your podcast and intro and who you bring on. So again, it's just there. Tim Ferriss says there's always going to be a market for long form content. There's just that's a niche. That's an eternal niche.
And it's also something when you talk about a time capsule too for yourself, it's something that I always felt growing up, when I was 25 and I'd look back on myself at 24 and you go, oh my God, that idiot, what were you thinking? Like what was going through your brain? How could you be that stupid? Right. And you're only 1 year further, but I was doing that at 24. I thought that at 23, at 23, I thought that at 22, right. And every year, but now going forward, when I hit next year, I can look back and, go back to who was I in, January of 2021. Oh, I can go back and look. I might not have exactly what I was going through, but I bet you if I go back 20 years from now and listen to a couple of these episodes during this time, and I can probably get a decent idea of where my head was at, even if it's just in a small modicum of way. And I think a lot of times it's in my intros and outros. If that's more, I'm so excited to have a guest on and talk about this. It almost overwhelms that. But then I always have that little piece of when I'm writing an intro and an outro, it's usually after the fact. I'm by myself. I'm just thinking about what I want to talk about. And I think those things are going to be cool going forward for myself, just again, selfishly to look back on it, to see who I was at that time, because it's very interesting when you go back and listen to some of my favorite podcasters that have been, very, established for a long time, like a Bill Burr, and you go listen to Bill Burr, 8-9 years ago, and you listen to what he was talking about and where his mindset was at, and now he's a father and a husband and all these things, and he's grown so much, and you get to see that, and it's in the pie, it's right there in front of you. You get to see human growth on a very open and intimate scale, and it's very cool to be able to see that, and then to be able to do that for myself and have other people kind of come along that ride with me. It's like they're becoming one of my most intimate friends without even having to have a conversation. It's a cool, it's just something cool to think about. I mean, I think if you think about it too long, you'll give yourself an aneurysm, but you got to just, like Joe Rogan always says, you just got to keep going and not think about it too much. Just, that's just me and you in a conversation. Nobody's listening. It's just that. And, I was kind of surprised. I don't know if you've heard this before. Maybe you have, but I kind of thought it'd be more, I felt right away as the first episode, you kind of forget that you're on a microphone right away. I kind of thought that, oh, people are going to hear this would stick with me for a long time. And I don't know if it's just how many podcasts I listened to kind of prepared me for it. I was kind of already ready, but I don't know. Is that something that you hear that people struggle with? Because I didn't struggle with that much, other than maybe the first 10 minutes of each episode.
I hear that people don't like the sound of their own voice a lot.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
I haven't heard too much like that specifically of like, I'm very conscious of everyone that's going to be listening. But I think that plays into the whole imposter syndrome thing, is just the idea of all eyes on me or all ears on me or saying the wrong thing. And, that can cause people to over edit in the beginning because, which I think is fine because you learn how to be more conversational and fluid and remove certain crutch phrases, as I messed that word up. You crutch phases. But I think that it's, I lost my train of thought, actually.
Well, that's perfectly fine because I got questions for days. Another thing I was going to ask you earlier, and I kind of got off into another tangent, is in all those people that come to you to either start a podcast or to grow their podcast, what kind of mix do you think that is? Do you think it's more people reaching out that have an idea for a podcast and haven't started and need help getting off the ground? Or do you think it's more people that are more at my stage where they've got it out there, they're on the platforms, but now they need to take it to the next level?
That's such a cool question. I actually meditate on this exact thing way too many hours every day because I'm actively trying to find my people who, I really love taking people through a podcast launch, because it really is a transformative experience. And it's just so fun to go from idea to the fully launched thing. But when I do notice that there's more podcasts that need help that already exist out there than it seems to be to find people who are completely ready to dive in and start. It seems like a lot of people will start and they don't know how to grow the show, or something's not working and the audience isn't quite as engaged as they were hoping, or it's not growing according to the speed they hoped. And I feel like that is kind of more common. And so I'm able to work with people and understand kind of which pieces are missing from their plan, from their strategy, what's not connecting and stuff like that.
For sure. And that was something, I mean, I think I asked you about this the first time we talked too, but just when I hear somebody that has something like the podcast farm, like you have, my mind, I'm a business guy, right? I got a business degree, and, growing up, my dad was a big businessman. So my mind kind of works on that sense. So first, I think we didn't even get through 10 minutes and I was already pitching you ideas for things that you could do. And one of the things I was thinking about is just, have you put any thought or lots of thought into what you are going to be able to offer other than the specific things of people coming to you either to start to launch or to help get their branding off the ground and to expand? But to me, the first thing I thought of is, if you have all these people coming to you, you'd have a stable of people. Have you ever looked into, networking, advertising between the group of them, being a guest, intermodal to bring these people from guests on one show to the other if they have a good match? Like, have you thought of the other expanses and the other options that you could offer to people that just expand on your services by just the position you're in?
Yeah, I appreciate your ideas and thoughts on it. I definitely have. I mean, it started as an idea of making like a podcast label. And I know that the common word is network, like a podcast network, but they also kind of, some podcasters have a bad taste in their mouth about that word.
Yeah, there's been some rough networks over the years. That's for sure.
There's been some rough labels too, but I guess coming from the music industry, I feel like a podcast label for me, because I had a great experience with my label, Gravitas Recordings. Shout out Jesse Breda and team. But they serve their audience, they serve their artists so well, and so I have thought about, as I move forward, and I do kind of suggest guests and different clients to each other to guest exchange and stuff. But I think what you're talking about is really interesting, which is like systematizing how we can all work together and advertise advertise and promote. And that, I mean, that is the idea, is that it's easier to grow shows together than it is
right.
alone.
And that was just that, if you have one guest that you help grow to a decent size, right, and they'd be looking for advertisement, right, to just say, another service you could offer is to say, hey, I can help you get this off the ground, and for an extra $50, I can get you an ad on this podcast that has X amount of viewership, and maybe get you throw something in on that side, or for you just to say, hey, you're of a certain size now, I'm looking for more clients, do you want to advertise the podcast farm on your podcast and maybe get people that are starting to do it, right? Like that's
that's
seems like a no-brainer to me. I think you need to start doing it right now.
Yeah. I'm on it. No, there's so many things to do in a business, and it's like what is the most important. And I've been meditating on this a lot, because it's like you can give any business $20K, and it doesn't mean it's going to make them successful. In fact, it might make them crash randomly if it might give them too much fuel in the wrong direction. And so knowing what to do, knowing what the priority is, knowing what's going to push the mission forward is a continual like puzzle and exploration. And so I have tons of ideas written out, and it's all over the place. Trying to figure out how to piece it together is really fun for me. I also I don't have a business degree, but I love business. I've been in startups and around entrepreneurs my whole life. And so I just love thinking about how to connect the pieces to make cash flow out to everybody and serve everybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's I'm just going back to thinking about that label versus network. That's something that, in our discussions, that's something that I like to do too. I loved that process of starting a podcast, and I loved the thought of helping other people do the same, right? We kind of already talked about that. That's something just, I don't know if I'd make it a business, but just if I had friends or some, people that I really believed in, I thought could do it to help them as well. And I'm just curious, in terms of people that are just starting, and then maybe I'll ask this question kind of in two different veins, for people that are just starting, and then people like myself that are already, started but need some help. What do you think the biggest pitfalls you see for both, that people are, over and over again, as people come to you, you see the common mistakes that people are making? What do you think the biggest pitfalls you see there are?
Yeah. Well, not, excuse me. Basically, sorry, let me just clear my throat real quick.
Yeah, no problem, brother.
So basically, people are going to run into like an issue with the visual identity and the brand and like the messaging of the words and on the social networks. Like something about the way that it's being marketed and shown visually isn't hitting. And it's not clear enough. People literally don't know to click on it, and that's something they want. Another thing might be that they haven't niched. It's too broad, or it's not a topic that's resonating with enough people for whatever reason. Or it does, again, tying into the branding, it's not illuminating what it is that it's talking about in a way that's clear for people to understand. Obviously, not good sound is a common problem.
For
people not having great sound, and not being consistent, just not continuing. I think the biggest problem that people would face is to just not continue, because if you continue, it'll get better, and if you continue, it'll be successful eventually. And so that's probably the biggest thing, is to just not continue. People stop.
And you hear that all the time. I mean, every time somebody talks about the number of podcasts out there, I can't remember what the exact number is, but I feel like I've heard it parroted to me a million times of, X% of podcasts don't last 3 months. It's like, yeah, I'm well aware of that. And I'm actually counting on that. You know what I mean? I feel like that's what separates people that are actually passionate about it and have that real drive and a passion for the medium itself, from those people that are just in it to make a buck, right? Like I said, you can hear that immediately when you listen to someone, what they're in it for, or at least I can, I feel.
And it's like someone completely different narrating the intro. And I'm not, anyone listening who has a podcast, I'm not bad mouthing you. Although I would challenge, I can't think of a very good use case where having someone else narrate your intro makes it more pro. I think that's old style of doing things, and I think people want more humanity. They want you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so funny to me of all the different positions and all the different areas that I need help with my podcast. Like I could use, some audio editing, I could use some video edit, I could use some branding, I could use all these things, and I'm actively looking for it. Micro content, I'm actively looking for these things. But you know what gets offered to me all the time? people to fucking say my intros and outros for me. Like, who needs that? I'm thinking the exact same thing. I don't know one case where that would be beneficial, but it seems like I get that offered to me all the time of people hitting me up to, like, that's voiceover. I mean, and it probably just goes back to that. There's a lot of voiceover artists that are always just looking for freelance work. That's probably why they're out there. But man, that seems like a sure case where the supply is definitely outstripping the demand.
You know where it might come in handy oftentimes, and this is actually one of the ways I tell people how to monetize their podcast, which is don't do a podcast for yourself, do a podcast for someone else.
Right.
If you have the chops as a host, people don't. Not everyone wants to do that. And so if you're good on the mic and or if you like it, and you can actually find people who need podcast hosts, or they write a script and they need a voiceover actor to do it or whatever. That's maybe some of those people are kind of looking for more corporate podcasts or people who aren't trying to say their own content.
Well, that is something that I've never thought of. Because something in my head, I never planned on having one podcast. That was never in the cards. I mean, right now I'm focusing on it. I'm doing one podcast because that's what I have available and that's what I'm putting all my effort into. And I think trying to do multiple right now might be detrimental unless I found the right person, right? It was always kind of, I'll start one on my own. I'll do that and I'll always continue that. That'll always be the base. But so many of my favorite podcasters have a bunch of podcasts. They do one on their own, then they have one with somebody they like, right? And, I'm always open for people to, start up a second one. But I never thought of going where, if there's a business or something that could really use a podcast and would have a lot of benefit to approach them and bring that forward, because I think I could do that. I mean, I have the confidence that I could be successful in any kind of vein of podcasting or just be on a mic or anything really. I have a lot of confidence in that, but I'd never even thought of that. So that's a great idea. My mind's just spinning. I'm trying to get back to the interview. I think I'm already, 3 weeks down the road of thinking all these people I'm going to ask and all these different ideas that have, man, that's a great idea.
We should let's do a follow-up in like 2.5 years and just like check in where we are.
Holy man, I think we'll have to do it sooner than that. I think we'll both be a lot further. Maybe we'll say 6 months and then we'll do every 6 months until the 2.5 year mark. But that's something. Here's another question I didn't have written down, but it's something that I've kind of tossed around in my head and I don't think there's a right answer to it. But having repeat guests on, like there's I'm now at 40. This will be episode 43, and there's lots of guests that I had on that I want to have on again. And an easy one for me, because so many of these have been Zoom. It's let's get you on again in person, because then it doesn't matter. It's like a different interview, right? In person versus Zoom. But with COVID keeping extending, it seems like that's not going to be an option for some of these. I'm just going to have to do one. Is there a kind of a minimum where you think you've seen oversaturation? Like you say, I don't think there's a right answer to this, but is there a kind of again that doesn't oversaturate your listener?
So kind of echoing back that most important concept, which is like serving the audience. And one of the ways that I heard from Billy J. Atwell of Unshakable Self-Confidence podcast, it's a great, inspiring show, is to serve your audience, to survey your audience, to send out to your audience and ask them what episode they liked the most, what they didn't, to really understand what's working and to do more of that. So for instance, if someone amazing comes on the show and the response is awesome to that, you should absolutely invite the person on again and try and continue the conversation in some sort of meaningful way. I don't see any problem with someone coming on every week for months if your audience is stoked. Maybe they become your co-host or something. But if you're having the same conversation, that maybe would burn some audience members out.
For sure. And that's kind of something that was also in my head, right? Like every time I have a guest on that I'm really excited about, because I've always had that thought of having multiple podcasts, like I know I've already had on probably, 3 or 4 guests that I would start a podcast with right now that I think I think I got a little bit of the Joe Rogan in me, where everybody that comes on, I'm always about, you need a podcast, right? Like I've tried to get a bunch of people, but like I could name 3 or 4 right now that if they're willing, I would start a podcast with them right now. And I just think that I see in so many other people, and I think imposter syndrome must be what comes in and kind of puts the kibosh on it, because a lot of people don't have that confidence. But to me, I'm confident in them. I think on their own, even without me, they could have their own podcast, right? And then I think with me involved, just because my, arrogance or whatever it is, I think it'd be even more successful, right? If I
the path.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really a good way to succeed in starting, is to go with someone who knows. So you leading someone through, they're going to have so much more of an easy time, and not not just easy. They're going to have a better time, I think, going with someone together. And so I think that's awesome. And do you think it's a imposter thing for them, or do you think they just don't want to do it because it takes so much time. Like I would say a good podcast is synonymous with brand and business. Like if you make a podcast and it's not a business, then it's a money pit because it takes so much time, right? And time is money.
For sure.
It needs to make itself. It needs to be self-supported. So in that reason, I think podcasts just take a lot of time. Do you think that's why some people just aren't into it? They're not called to be their own entrepreneur.
For sure. And that's what held me back for so long. I always wanted a podcast, but I would, try and figure out these cockamamie schemes where I wouldn't have to put the work in, and, that I would somehow have this audience that somebody would recognize and they would do the work and just say, show up on the mic and we'll edit it and we'll put it out and we'll brand it. Right. That's what I was looking for. And that's what wasted so many years of me not chasing this, right? Was waiting on that. That's never going to come. It's unrealistic. Right. But for some reason I was stuck on that, but it was because I was well aware of all the things that go into it and all the time that it takes to do this and all the effort and the heartache and the no's and all that stuff. But I mean, now that I'm through it, or not through it, I'm in it. Now that I've dove into it, it's it's all worth it. All that stuff, as soon as you get on the mic, if you enjoy it this much, it's all going to be worth it to you for those couple hours of on-screen time of conversation that I enjoy more than almost anything else. It's worth it for all that headache. And then 2, if I could do it again, it'd be so much easier. That's why I'm so excited now to start a second one, because, the learning curve was so steep that I almost ran smack dab into that cocksucker, like just right into it. Right. And I don't think I'd do that again. I think now that I have the understanding, I don't think it'd be a million times better, but I think it'd be probably 2 or 3 times better and a lot easier. But I think, definitely you're on the money there with people not wanting to invest that type of commitment is there. But I feel like what my counter argument back to that point would be is people don't understand how much work it is. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand. I was quite engrossed in the podcast world, and I think I had one idea of how much effort would go into it. And I think I was even surprised by how much goes into it and how much time and effort, especially to keep the consistency level is. And, and then someone goes, well, can't you just miss a week? And I almost go ballistic on them, right? My face turns red because they don't understand, they just pretty much swore at me, right? Like if they understood the depth to which you have it. But I feel like, that's probably it. It's probably a combination of those 2 things, that imposter syndrome, second guessing himself. Do I have anything to say? Plus, who has the time these days? It seems like everybody, regardless of what they're doing, even if they're in lockdown right now, they seem too busy to do much, right? It's almost that society dictates you be so busy that everybody has to put on a facade of busyness, even if they're not, right? Because if you're not busy, you're lazy. That, I mean, not in actuality, but in how people look at it, that's almost how it seems. So I think in order almost to admit to start a podcast is to admit that I wasn't busy enough, or that I was being, maybe not completely honest with how busy I was before, right? Which is definitely something that held me back, right? Like something, how's that going to look on all these other things in my life, right? I have a job that is pretty demanding and pretty, I don't know what the right word is without sounding awful, but it took a lot out of me and still does. And that's one of the hardest things to balance right now. That's probably the biggest thing holding me back from what I really want to do with this, is just the time commitment I have, because I have to keep that as a number one priority if I want to keep a job. Right. And that's, but that allows me to not have to put pressure on, right? I haven't had a second thought about how this podcast is going to make money, because I don't need to, because I have that other thing, and that's what supports this, and it all works together. But it's just one of those things. It's very interesting.
What do you think about like not doing what you love for money versus doing what you love for money? Do you think my partner was talking to me about it. Like if you can have something you don't hate doing for money and then do what you love because you love it, that's better. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know if I agree 100%. I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think a lot about that. And I think that's something that I've, like you say, I think I've meditated on that a lot. I think I had a very different understanding of what that was. I think I went through different phases. So my dad, like I said, my dad was a businessman. I got to watch that. And to me, I don't think I put a lot of thought into what I wanted. I just kind of assumed, I want that. That is my path. That's what I'm going to do. So I followed that path. I got my business degree. I went to work. I worked hard. I got this job. I did my best at it. And I got to a point where if you would have asked me 5 years ago, hey, what would you be happy with? What would you want? I would draw you the exact picture of what I was doing, 2 years ago. I would, I want this truck. I want this house. I want this, dollar amount per year. I want this many employees. I pretty much checked all the boxes, and I thought that would bring me happiness, and it did for a while. And then I started to become less happy, and it would become more tedious. And I would be so jealous of all these podcasts and these people chasing these dreams, and stand-up comedians and kind of, video game streamers, and just the life that they live and not answering to anybody. And, I think I'm someone that is not designed to have a 9 to 5. I don't think that's how I work. I think I have more of that artist brain in me, but I think I was always told that wasn't me. You're a business, you're that 9 to 5 guy. And I kind of just partitioned that all away and wasn't honest with myself. And now, in making that change and finding something I love that I do for free, actually negative money, like you said, it's a money pit. It is 100% a money pit if you're not making money. But I would pay, I'd pay 10 grand a month to be able to have this happiness that this brings, right? Like, that is what's so worth it at the end of the day. So it doesn't matter to me. And now I have that. And luckily I did that work in the past to have something that can make money so that I don't have to worry about on this. But then it becomes that point where there's going to be a point down the road where I'm going to have to rebalance that in order to take this where it needs to go, right? And that's something that definitely eats at me each and every day, of thinking of that and what are other people going to say. Because to me, I know exactly how I feel about it. My feelings are pretty pretty made up, I think, from the day one that I started this, of what I want to do and how that's going to look. But so much of what flips my stomach upside down is, what is everyone else going to say about it, and what are which I know you should never think about, and that shouldn't impact your decision making, but it does. It's hard to separate that all out. And I think it's definitely changed. So to get back to the question you actually asked, I think before I thought I could definitely, if I had the right amount of money, I could do anything. It doesn't matter. And I think I found out that is not true. And then I think now, in doing this, I think I also thought I could never do something I loved if it wasn't paid well, right? Like, when growing up, when I was asked what I want to do, I wanted to be a lawyer or a dentist, all these things that made lots of money, right? Because money was always taught to me that is the number one, that is the everything, right? And then actually what podcast showed me is just, if you find something you love and you're passionate about and you just chase it with everything you got, money will come. Success, that all follows. That is a consequence of this other thing. You're putting the cart before the horse if you're thinking about, I'm going to do this for money, right? And I think that is just, it was a lesson that, and you always heard that, but it's very different experientially learning something versus hearing something told to you, right? And it took that whole journey to get me to where I am today, for me to have that understanding and to have this. And that's what, lights that fire that keeps me driven to keep doing this every day and keep trying to make it better and better, and eventually have it so that I can, just do this and a couple other things that I'm also passionate about, and have that support me, right? That's kind of the end goal of the whole thing. But it's just about not getting impatient, because that's something I definitely do. And I want it to be exactly what I can envision in my head, tomorrow, but that's just not realistic, right? And you just got to take those wins when you get guys like the Coen brothers on, and that experience and what that felt like. You just got to hold on to that and realize that's not going to come every day. It's going to be, a lot more of that frustrating grind and trying to edit, and you lose the audio, and you have it all edited up. It's ready to release. And then someone texts you, oh, you forgot to edit out this pee break, and then you're getting out of bed and going to try and find it and edit it out to make sure it doesn't release for the next day. Or you have this great interview ready to release, and something I tell all my guests, I told you before, anybody that has anything they're not comfortable with after the episode, I'll take it out, right? And you got this great episode with these great stories, and then right before you're going to release, they tell you, hey, can you take that one story out? And just to them, of course, no big deal. And in your head, fuck, that was the best story, and you're going in to edit it out and all that. So, it's just about keeping grounded with your understanding of what it all is, and what you're getting out of it and why you're doing it, and keeping that at the forefront of your mind, and just keeping the enjoyment. And I think if I never lose this enjoyment that I have, I could do this for the rest of my life and not think twice about it, regardless of how many people listen or, how much money it makes. That's all just secondary.
It's really inspiring to hear your enthusiasm and your joy that you found in the platform. And, what you're saying about money, it's so true. I think a lot of people, it's not that the money's going to make them happy anyway, it's whatever it's going to buy. So it's right. Like going deeper is always a good idea. So like even if that is the goal, then like, what's the deeper, what do I want with money? And oftentimes it's going to be like acceptance, and connection.
Love. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. And that's why I believe so strongly in like amplify what you love. Mm-hmm. Turn up the volume on what you love. And that just brings more love into the world, that brings your joy into the world, and it inspires you. And I agree that the financial success will come as a result. And always good to like have strategies and plans and mentors and guides who can kind of help steer things. But the discipline, the drive, and the motivation to reach those goals has to come from that place of joy and play and having fun. Yeah.
How, when you, or I guess I would have to ask, if you have experiences, have you had anybody that you've been working with where you realize that is missing from them? I mean, probably something you wouldn't work with to begin with. That might be one where you just give some resource to, but have you ever got into the process with someone, realize that when you're already in too deep that somebody's missing that? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, it was more overwhelming than they realized, and it just kept getting postponed and they didn't launch, they didn't go forward, they didn't do any of the steps needed to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the desire or the understanding of the benefit that it could give, interviewing. It's not for everyone. Not everyone has to do it, but yeah, I think that it's possible that people can bite off more than they can chew with all that's going on with COVID and business and just like trying to make ends meet, and everyone's signing up for extra webinars and courses now. And so it can be hard to like commit to launching a show. And then the work, once it's up, the work to keep it going it's sort of like two phases. You have all the pre-work to launch, which is its own thing. And then you have podcasting life, which is what like to podcast, and it's sort of like a discipline, right? It's just, you have this weekly reoccurrence, or maybe it's multiple times a week where you're interviewing people and setting up, and it becomes part of your life. And that not everyone's ready to have a new thing be part of their life.
And I think also too, I think a lot of times I think everyone assumes they know themselves well. And I think a lot of times people can lie to themselves on how well they know themselves. And I think sometimes people go, oh, I have a real fire in my belly, right? And you can't tell how strong that fire is unless, if you're very in touch with yourself, very honest with yourself, you can feel it and you know what that was. And I feel like that's what happened with me. Is I knew as soon as I was made the decision, I knew what that fire was, and I knew whatever kind of water got thrown onto that. But I think some people I think it kind of goes back to the argument of people being out of touch with their bodies. Is, we're not out hunting every day, using our bodies every day. We're pretty stagnant. And I think that understanding is gone, and people will assume, oh, I got this raging fire for a podcast, I'm going to start, and then someone throws a little water on it and, oh, it's gone. What happened to that blazing, that little cup of water, this little pushback on the launch date because there's a little bit of difficulty, to me, that's a little cup of water, right? If someone threw that on me, fuck, I'll eat that for dinner. I wouldn't even notice it. I wouldn't even feel the steam, right? But I think people just don't understand what they have, and that oftentimes they can get in there and, a couple things go wrong and they realize, oh, I'm not as passionate about this as I thought I was, right? And that's unfortunate too. And I think, but to me, that's a great lesson. You just got to learn that hey, this is a good learning. This is what I'm not passionate about. That's just as important to finding what you are passionate about. And two, hey, maybe how did I get to that point where I was so, under my own spell of what I was telling myself? And maybe what do I have to do to become more in touch with myself so that won't happen again? So I'm not able to lie to myself as easily, because I think everyone lies to themselves, whether that is, 10% of everything that you are is a lie or 90%. I think that's very different. I think that's up to you to do that individual work, to bring that number down, to sit with your shadows and to sit with the own things you don't like about yourself, to find exactly what it is that is that honest, true self, and what that is passionate about and what you want to do with that. And I think that's scary for a lot of people. So they just pretend, yeah, I do that. I totally do that. I know exactly who I am, but really they haven't entered into there's whole, they always say there's, rooms in your mind they haven't gone into. There's whole wings of that house that they've never even stepped foot in, right? The light, there's not even power to it, right? And that's, okay for some people. That's how you manage, right? The other side of that coin is people have a lot of darkness. Maybe there's some rooms that they're not ready to go in there. You physically can't. And that's unfortunate too. Everyone's different. And I think I just need to have a little bit more compassion for those people, because I think I oftentimes just judge first and don't think how I usually, that's what comes later. And that's usually what meditation does for me, is it allows me to not roll with that first snap judgment of what that was, and to give it, let's go 15 seconds further. And, oh, well, they probably have seen a lot of shit in their life, and they probably got a lot going on, and, probably didn't have enough love growing up. And that's what put them to that point. And I think that's something to me that, this process of bettering myself to make sure that I'm a good person for the audience has helped in so many other ways. And that's another thing that I think is so special about podcasts. I know you haven't got a word in 10 minutes here, but I'm going to keep going. Something where I feel when you work on skills, say it's for a job, there's certain skills that are going to be applicable across your whole life, and there's ones that aren't. There's going to be very specific knowledge that you gain. And I feel like something like a podcast is so applicable. It's conversation. It's something that's going to be, applied to the rest of your life. It's going to, if you work in the other areas, I found myself, I've gotten so much better with how I interact with people at work since starting this podcast. I've seen huge gains in all areas of my life, relationships, all these things from doing this, and very specifically from the day that it started to till now, you can see that large growth. And I think that is another thing. One, you should be passionate about it. And two, you should be seeing huge growth, right? Like if what you're investing a majority of your time during the day in isn't bettering you in a huge way that's noticeable to you and to those around you, maybe that's a sign that you need to reevaluate what you're doing, because you should be, human beings are meant for growth. That's what we do. That's what, just even if you want to go past humans, that's just what life is, that's what consciousness, it's all just that drive to get better, that little bit. And if you're not seeing that, that's where a lot of that stank of stagnation can come in with, is when you don't feel that genuine growth with yourself. That's when people become unhappy and, they hate their jobs and all that stuff. That all stems from that unfulfilledness. And I think, when things kind of turn dark, like this COVID time, that really shines a light on, those things, right? Maybe it's easy when you have all your friends at the bar every weekend to kind of drink that pain away, and then that goes away. You can really, you can go one or two ways with that. You can sit with it and you can, tame it, or you can let it tame you. And it's a little scary to think about how many people are going through that process right now in the world.
Yeah. Wow. So many things you said there. But yeah, I mean, right now people have had to sit with themselves in ways that none of us have had to sit with ourselves before. Anxiety, depression, divorce, everything is up. All the rates are up, right? Just everything is boiling right now. And I think one of it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this too, but like talking to so many people around the world in different circumstances, it's actually reassuring, because what I've started to hear is a lot of the same things. Like everyone's going through anxiety. Everyone's going through some depression times. Everyone's going through interpersonal relationship stress with family, with partners, with friends. Everyone's dealing with money stuff. And it's like life. But especially now, I think people are learning more about the mental health piece. And that's a really amazing thing, because it's not something that we're educated on in school enough. We're not educated about our brain, about how it works. We're not educated about how to do relationships well. We're not educated about really amazing communication skills. And it shows in society when there's so much unhealthy conflict. Conflict's great. Conflict is always going to be there, but there's so much unhealthy conflict. And so I think that, learning how to, like you said, I loved it, sitting with our shadows, like really getting to know ourselves and spending time. One of the reasons why podcasting as just a platform for this, or medium for this, writing, you could just call it journaling, just doing something consistently that is exploratory of the self, like what interests you, what's coming up for you, how do you feel, all these things are really beneficial. And I actually think even if you launched a podcast and it only made it past episode 5 and then it fizzled out, you will have grown and benefited and gained from that experience.
For sure.
Know yourself more. Just because, like you said, putting our voice out there, like I am I'm like transmitting something. I have to stand for what I'm saying, and that is scary. And so it makes me do some work and think about myself. And it sounds like you also, through this process, you were, growing and developing and considering yourself. And as you bring in new kinds of people, things have to shift, and you're constantly kind of like,
it's super interesting. And I love what you said about, I've definitely beat this horse quite a few times on different podcasts, but the lack of education growing up in a lot of those factors, right? Like one of the biggest things I found when I got to university, I took my first psych class. It was one of my first semester of my first year, Psych 101. And to hear all these logical fallacies, all these, imposter syndrome, all these things that our minds play tricks on are very, very, important information for navigating the world and navigating your own mind. And it's like, how am I learning about this at 18? Where was this in grade 6? Where was this in grade 7? Just even one, a 3-week course on mental health at some point, and it would have been just so beneficial to so much of this, right? Like just that's why I bring up imposter syndrome. I mean, I'm glad you brought it up on this episode so I didn't have to, because I think my listeners are getting sick of me talking about it. But it's so important, if one person that has never heard of what imposter syndrome is hears it and realizes it, it's such a game changer. I mean, I'm just saying that for me, it was such a game changing thing to hear about. And I heard about it on a podcast, this imposter syndrome. Oh, everybody has this. Oh, that feels so nice to not feel like it's just me that has this feeling, to know that, if you're going into a meeting with the CEO, he probably has the same thing. It's very few. It's a very, I would venture a guess, like 1% to 3% of people in my head. And that's probably people that pay a lot of other prices in their life by not having that, because I think that imposter syndrome comes from a very human place. And I think when you don't have that, it's probably more of the people that, lack some real empathy and lack some real ability to, talk to other humans on a certain emotional level, right? If you don't have that. And I think that's, for all the hurt that imposter syndrome causes, I think most people that have it would be glad and happy of the person that they are with it than who they would have been if they didn't.
Right. Well, I mean, it is a sign. If you feel imposter syndrome, keep going. You're on the right track. If you feel fear, you are on the precipice of a new area where you haven't been before, and it's good. And I would take it as a sign of like, okay, I'm totally where I need to be. If I'm not feeling imposter syndrome, if I'm totally complacent and comfortable, I'm not growing. And so I think that it's really important to feel that. And, I'll share something that Real Rap with Reynolds, he's a great YouTube, he's an educator in middle school and a YouTuber influencer, just helps people teach better. He's incredible. And I had him on the show. The episode hasn't launched yet, but he says, and this is a quote from someone else that I don't know.
Yeah.
One person's ordinary is another person's extraordinary. Right. And the magnitude and the importance of that, it just has to be meditated on and pondered, because it's a neurological thing. They've done studies like we are not able to remember what it's like before we learn something. So we can't remember the state of mind of not knowing. We only know that we know, which is why it's really hard sometimes to teach people, because we get frustrated that they don't just know how to do the thing. Yeah. It's so obvious like that, right? Yeah. But it's because our brains, they know. I don't know all the scientific lingo behind it, but it's a real study that the brain just has a difficult time recalling that experience. And so that is a really good thing for us, because what it means is if you just turn a camera on all day, basically your life will be extremely interesting to a large amount of people on the planet. Right. It's just going to be, because your ordinary is someone else's extraordinary. No one else is like you. No one else has your life, your story, your experiences, and it will captivate someone. And that's why you can just turn on a mic and try and be you. You don't have to try and be someone you're not. People would rather you be you, and you will attract your people.
Right. And I think that's so, you're so on the money with that. I think just the fact that you turn that camera on is that one step that separates you from a lot of other people that wouldn't have that wouldn't have the guts, right? So even if you turn the camera on and do typical ordinary stuff, right? I think you've seen this with video game streamers, where these streamers get to these huge sizes and they're just playing video games like they would even if the camera wasn't on, but they're just willing to put it on. And that's what people, that's what hooks them in. Like what hooks them is the fact that they're willing to be on camera, right? And holy shit, I wouldn't be able to do that. Let's see what this guy's got. And then what keeps them there is that whatever that little thing is, right? And I think there's a lot of times you click on people and you don't match, and it doesn't, it hooks you in, but then it falls out and you're off into that sea of media, because there's a million other people that are doing similar things that you could try and connect with. But it's just the law of large numbers. Even if you go on and be completely you and completely esoteric with your interests and your passions, there's going to be a lot of people out there that line right up with all those things, right? I think that's and then you can start to create where, I don't think there was a lot of, jujitsu, muscle car loving, MMA watching, psychedelic using, that wasn't an archetype before Joe Rogan came and created it. And then you see people that come in, right? I wasn't a huge MMA guy before I started listening to him, but just the passion, it's so infectious to see from somebody that really believes fully in what he's talking about and what he's passionate about, you get drawn in with that. And now you see these people, maybe brings in, maybe people were a big MMA fan, that's what brought them in. And then they see all these other pieces too, and the compassion piece and all these, loving your neighbor and all these other things that he's promoting all get brought onto that. And then they expand out and it creates this archetype on its own. Right. But now if I do that for myself, if someone that, loves, there could be a whole section of people that love reading and video games and podcasting and all these things, and can bring that together. And maybe you bring somebody in because they like the Coen brothers books, but then they come in, they listen to it, and that's their entryway. But then they hear these other things, and they hear about, I'm trying to think of another thing that I've had people on, talking about, electric cars. Maybe that brought them in. Now that's an interest of theirs, and they start to look into other places too. I mean, one of the biggest things I found that Joe Rogan gave, other than all the, hours and hours of knowledge and wisdom that he's put out there, but the guests, like I never would have heard of Alex Friedman. I never would have heard of the Weinstein brothers. I never would have heard of, all these comedians, Pete Holmes, and, just, I could sit here all day and just say all the people that he brought, but I'm so thankful for that. And now to think that maybe down the road, I will be able to do that, where maybe people don't connect with me. I'm not that person for them, but I could put them on to another person that they do and that they really connect with. That is such a meaningful thing. It's been so meaningful to me that for me to be able to offer that to other people, it's just a cool thought. And it's another area that, I find that the more I get into this rabbit hole that is podcasting, the more other ways of rewarding things that I didn't think were there. It's rewarding enough in itself, just the enjoyment you get out of it. But then there's all these other things that tack onto it that just make it special, make it what it is, right? It's cool to see. And I feel like, I hope that never stops. I hope, 10 years into this, I'm still finding more ways that it's rewarding that I never thought of. And then, I have a sneaking suspicion that's true, but it might just slow down, but who knows, I guess I'll have to get somebody on the podcast that has been doing it for 10 years, find out.
Yeah. I wonder how Joe feels. Does he still get really excited when like certain folks comes on, because there's always going to be someone who you admire, and that's always going to be really interesting to talk to him.
Yeah.
So
he says he doesn't, and he's a fucking liar, because you can tell when he has certain people on. He always says, like, he'll admit to it a couple of times. He always says, I'm not excited, but you can see it in him, right? Like, which is funny to listen to so many hours, even when he's, lying to himself. I think you can tell when, as a listener, you can tell a lot of the times, like, oh, you don't believe that. That's bullshit, right? And it's fine. And you can see exactly the reason why he would get to that point, why he would say that. But it's like, oh no, if you were honestly sat with that for about 15 more minutes, I think you would agree that you're lying, right? And it's just cool to see. So, yeah, no, for sure. One thing, I mean, I'm sure this is probably the question that you get all the time. Probably, I would imagine people ask you this within 10 minutes of having a conversation with you is, what are good numbers? I think that was something that in all the podcast groups I've been looking at and all these things, it's a constant question that always comes up with people. And for myself, I tried as much as I can not to look at the numbers and only look at it in terms of trying to tailor the content. Oh, they like that one, they didn't like that one. Not, oh, I need to do this because it's going to get more numbers. What kind of downloads would a typical podcast be hoping to hit if they started and they marketed it the right way?
Well, so I think there's two questions there. Let me see if I got the questions right, and then I'll go into them. One is, what kind of numbers could a new podcast expect or hope for in the beginning?
Yeah.
And then the other is just, what are good numbers for podcasts?
Sure. That's perfect.
Fair?
Yeah.
So to answer that question first, I come from the music industry, right? And I have 1 million views between 2 songs on YouTube, and 3,000 monthly subscribers on Spotify that are streaming our music, and we're in all these playlists and thousands and thousands and thousands of listens and downloads on tracks. And it's a different metric than podcasts. It's just a different weight to it. Like someone downloading or listening to a song is a different thing. It's a 3-minute, 5-minute track versus a long conversation.
Different investment.
And you mentioned this at the beginning, is like a podcast audience is a different beast than a music audience, right? So just to start off that, to like give an easy number, I've worked with extremely qualified people to launch a podcast, and they reached maybe like 4,000 downloads after a year. And I've heard of people launching, and they grew really fast. And the key is a network. So if you already have a big network, then launching a podcast is going to work out great for you.
Right.
If you don't have a big network and you're launching the podcast to grow your network, you may not get a lot of numbers in the beginning. You may see under a few hundred in the first month. you may not get it. It all depends what you do. So part of what I teach people is I have a magnetic marketing strategy. I have charts and templates and workflows that I use to take each episode and make it stretch and go as far as possible. And if you do that consistently with every episode, it's bound to grow. You're gonna bring people in. But then there's a lot of other marketing tools that you can add. And a lot of podcasters, they're not marketing majors, or they're not it's not really their background, and marketing is a huge umbrella term for a lot of different kinds of processes, but it's basically just going out and being like, do you need this? Is this what you need? Is this the answer to your problem? Is this what you need? And so just to answer that, sum it up, numbers, I would say, you're going to be able to talk to sponsors if you're getting even 1,000 downloads per episode. I think you could find some sponsors, and you can definitely monetize your show in better ways than sponsors, with less than 1,000 per episode. But I would say if you're looking for like that kind of numbers, if you're starting to rake in like 500 to 1,000 per episode, you're starting to draw enough attention to be able to maybe pitch to some sponsors.
Right. And that was something that was kind of in my head of, there's definitely a certain point where kind of those types of sponsors you go in with. But in my head, I was trying not to think this way because I didn't want to concentrate on money or numbers at the start. And I just wanted to concentrate on the content. But, I figured even before, because I was thinking, it's quite expensive for this equipment. Like I could probably go out and just with the people I know that would be willing, just on the equity of what I've done in the past, to know that, I wouldn't come to them asking for something if I didn't think it'd be worth it and paid back to them. I could have got all the equipment sponsored, and I almost did that. I almost went to a couple people and saying like, hey, I'm starting this podcast. I'm going to, if you want to sponsor the mics, it's, a couple $100 and I'll just shout it out, in each intro and outro, hey, equipment sponsored by blah, blah, blah. And I think you could have done it. That's why I think every time I hear people in these groups say like, how many downloads do I need before I can start getting sponsorship and stuff? It's like, oh, well, if you know how to do it, you can do it at, 0 downloads. You could start right from the hop. And I always thought it was kind of
without even launching a podcast.
For sure you can. Right. So it's always, to me, I've been less concerned about the numbers in terms of like where I need to get to start sponsoring. Because if a sponsorship was if making money was what I was about right now, I could have ads on this tomorrow. I fully believe that if I wanted to, but that's not what I want to do, right? Like my favorite podcasts are those that only get the ads that they believe in. And it's always a product that they really use and that they really, want people to go out and buy, that they're invested with them, right? And that would put me to the point, I don't want something I don't really care about. I don't really have anything invested, whether they sell or not, only to the fact that it would show proof of concept for the strength of my show. But other than that, I have no incentive. I want them to be happy with the reach they're getting, but I also want to be, helping my audience and building that trust in my audience that I wouldn't sell them some crap, right? And I think that's very important. I think you see that in different, I have a lot of favorite podcasts that definitely go the other way. They don't care who the sponsorship is. They don't care what it is. They will sponsor on it, right? And I still like their content, and I would say that is probably a microcosm of a bigger issue that is what makes me like them less than maybe some other people. I don't think it's just the fact that they advertise the stuff. I think that's just a mindset that would allow them to do that comes through in other areas of their content. But then there's people where, if they advertise, right, like a Lex Friedman, like if he advertises something, it's a good product, he uses it, all these things, and he will talk about it, and you will hear it come up in the podcast, even unrelated to that stuff, right? And it's those things that go really far. And I think it's almost, you almost have to decide before you go in what kind of strategy you're going to have with that. Because I think if you go in thinking, oh yeah, I want to have it the one way where I really believe in the products, but then you sell out and you get something in there, that trust is kind of gone with your audience of that you really believe in these things, right? If you kind of go out and flog some shit, you don't really get a second. I'm sure you would eventually. Anybody gets a second chance if they work hard enough, but it's one of those things where, what's that?
You're saying it breaks some trust.
Yeah, for sure. It breaks some trust. And I think that's something where I think people probably do that without even realize. They're probably so excited to get a sponsorship. They don't care what it is. And I don't think they realize the detriment to future earnings that they're doing to themselves by not having a strong value system around that, right? And if you value your audience and value what you're selling to them, you should, in my opinion. I think if you want to be successful and you want to grow that audience and be with them for the long term, you should care about what they're getting out of your podcast too, right? Is everything is part of that content, right? If it's going to be on your on your channel, if it's coming through your channels, it's part of your content, and you have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
Has that been anything that you've discussed with potential clients that you've been helping out at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll share this little tidbit from Lewis Howes that I heard him say on Clubhouse, the new social media app. He was saying, and a lot of people say this, which is that ads and sponsors are not the first place that they would recommend people go to, because you're peddling other people's products and services that way. Whereas if you have your own products and services, you can monetize that way. And
Right.
in a way, it's almost like going into debt to take on ad sponsors, right? Then you have to produce a certain amount of episodes, and you have to show up and do it this way. And so
Right.
I feel like I try and guide people to develop an ecosystem that they're more in control of. It's their IP, it's their education products or information products or real products. Or if you're not going to do that, then at least try and go in community and go local, and then you can get more sponsors earlier on with less big budgets, because you can do it based on your trust and your relationship with the people in your life. So it definitely comes up. People who have a certain amount of downloads wanting to do ad sponsors, then the basic thing then is to get them ready to be pitching and make their show look as good as possible, so that when potential companies or brands want to advertise on it, they have everything they need in a one sheet to kind of make a good decision.
For sure. And that's and what type of stuff, just for anybody that's listening, maybe what type of things are companies, when you do reach that size, what kind of things are they looking to be on that one sheet that they want to, I mean, obviously downloads, like what kind of other stuff are
downloads, your like first 30-day downloads too. So, you could say, oh, I have however 10,000 downloads total or whatever, but they basically, from their point of view, they want to know how many ears they're going to get, eyes and ears on their product, right? And so it's cost per mil. I think it's actually like 1,000, but there's a certain metric for ads. And it differs with podcasting because of what you mentioned earlier, which is that the podcast audience are more likely to buy, they're more engaged. So there's sort of a cost per result potentially. You can have a sponsorship deal based on that.
Which is why you see so much success with those like discount codes and stuff, because that's exactly it. You get cost per result. If somebody goes in and buys that product, uses your product code, they have zero investment, right? Other than the money they put up, right? That was something I was thinking. If I found a product that could fit this market of that, I could even say, don't pay me anything unless somebody goes through with that. If 50 people come and buy your product, then we'll have something set out. Like, what is my remuneration for 50 results or 100 results or one result, right? And then it leaves it completely risk-free on their side, because, for me, when I'm looking at it, I don't want to bring any risk onto somebody. I don't want them to, overextend themselves. For me, I want it to be a partnership. I want them to benefit. I want me to benefit. I want it to be, growth. So that's definitely a model that I've been looking at, and just kind of looking at different, like you say, local brands that I could maybe partner up with and have some sort of discount code where, it's completely risk-free on their end. And I mean, anybody that's listening right now, if that is interesting to you, hit me up, because that's, no risk on your side, and I'll promote the hell out of it, and I'll make it, I'm not going to promote anything I don't believe in. And if I do believe in it, you'll get the best ad you'll ever damn hear from me.
And I've probably talked to 100 podcasters or more this year, and this guy is extremely serious and in love with podcasting. So this is a good investment. I mean, I'm about ready to put some podcast farm ads in here.
Hey, well, I think that was the first thing I pitched you, is some podcast farm ads. But I just think I think I'm so in love with every part of the medium, right? Like, I've seen these small guys grow and then get to that point, and seen them talk about the ads that they've brought on and these sponsorships, and these guys and losing sponsorships. I think I've heard that too. Like one of my favorite comedians, Ari Shafir, he goes through sponsorship guys like Candy, because he does not give a fuck what anybody says. He really toes the line all the time, steps over it daily, and he knows that. So as soon as an advertiser says, hey, can you not say, no, we're done. Like, as soon as you said, hey, can you do anything? He just drops them. And it's so admirable to me. And I feel like I love what he's doing so much and how pure to the art form that he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a pure artist. I mean, he's a stand-up through and through. And that's what it is. If you want to look at somebody that exemplifies the art form in its truest, in the truest sense of the word, he is that artist, right? And I think that's so fun to watch because you get to see him, that's his livelihood, right? Like there's nobody doing stand-up right now, but the fact that he still has enough virtue to say like, no, if you're going to be, even the smallest little percentage influencing what kind of content I'm bringing, I can't be in business with you, right? And that's something that I feel like I've been so impressed with. That's something I want to bring forward in mine is if anybody has anything to say about what I'm doing, then we can't be in business. And just to be upfront with that and to be, once you say something on a podcast, it's that extra level of accountability. And I love those guys that, make themselves accountable with their audiences for certain things like that. So, because now when somebody advertises on Ari's podcast, I know that they get it, right? Because they have to be fans of his podcast to let him, because his ad reads, he will purposely say the wildest, craziest shit in the ad read for that guy on like the first couple to make sure that if they're going to say anything, I'm just going to get them out of the way right now. And you see these guys that get amazing return, right? He's their favorite sponsor because, these little guys, they'll throw their money at him knowing people are going to believe him. He's going to make the ads funny enough that everyone's going to listen to him. That's a big thing, right? Not skip through them. He's going to make them a part of it. And it's just for the business side of it, of seeing what he's been able to do with how he markets it, just is so admirable to me. I just love how he did it and how he's gone about it. And that's just one example, but I've seen all these different guys do it slightly different ways, but just the values. It seems like podcasting has values, and it seems like not a lot of places, not a lot of markets, not a lot of industries in the entire world these days do. And it's something that, when you see it, you got to stick with it and you got to do everything you can to help keep that going. In my opinion, I think if you find virtue somewhere, you got to kind of, sow those seeds and make sure they flourish.
It's a really special format. It's a really special community, and I think it's actually more than the format. It's the people. It's a really special community, worldwide community of people doing a certain kind of art form, and that's why it feels sort of like the music industry in a sense. It's like a parallel art form.
Yeah, and it's taken a lot from it too. And I think what is cool about podcasting is it's almost tertiary to anything. You could start a podcast about anything, right? So it's got a lot of music people in it. It's got a lot of comedians, just because of kind of how the art form of podcasting expanded and how comedians were the first ones to take advantage. And they were so well set up because that's what their job is, to pretty much take down all those walls and be very open with people. They were already, basically lined up for this art form before it even came to be. But you get to see the inner workings of all these other things, and you get to see behind the curtain on so many industries that you never would have thought of, right? Like electronic music. I think there's so many people that love the scene and love everything about it, but you don't really get that in depth with some of these artists. But then they start a podcast and you're right in it with them, and now you get that whole nother level of fandom that you can go to. It's very very interesting to me. It's very cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool to explore it with someone else who is also enthusiastic about the platform and kind of get your take on the scene. And I definitely feel like we're in a special moment with the format and with the internet culture as it is, with all the upheaval and societal shifts that are going on. It's just we're in a special moment, and it's a difficult one, but it's also, crisis is a danger and an opportunity. So
yeah, always is. Yeah, no, for sure. I had a really good question. Here's a question. So one of the biggest things, first 6 months of the launch, I was really concentrating on my content and making sure it's good, getting kind of a format down of what I like, my intros, my outros. That was kind of my big goal. And then with the new year, one of my biggest goals is to try and be a guest on more podcasts, because I feel like I have a lot to bring in that form. I feel like I can do a really good job being a guest on them, especially with the pressure of not having, to carry the conversation, just to be able to pop in, talk as much as I want. You know what I mean? I feel like half the time I'm just holding back because I want to, go all out, but I have to give the guests some space. And I feel like I would be a very powerful guest on some podcasts, but I found it is a tough nut to crack. I have not been very successful. I've reached out a couple. I feel like also too, I haven't really asked to be a guest. I feel like I've tried everything but asking, and maybe that's just my the crux of it. I feel like I just feel too bad trying to ask them. I feel greasy trying to ask to be on somebody's podcast. But is that just something that will naturally come as my network grows and as I get on more, or is there a specific tack that you would take in terms of trying to grow the ability to be a guest on other podcasts?
I think that, things will definitely continue to happen as you grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably some things that I might be able to share that maybe you haven't tried. One thing that's really successful is super to the point one pager, and not even one pager, like an image, like a square image that has your photo, your qualifications, or your story, or your what's interesting, and your main talking points of what you can talk about, and like host of the podcast that what you do. Just, you want to make it easy so someone looks at you and they say, okay, I can talk to you about this stuff, this is going to work. And
that's a great idea.
And that really can help when you do it. And then the other way is to make it as easy as possible for people to say yeah and book you, and having calendar links, and just I'm really into streamlining processes, and I think coming from like marketing, like you can frame anything how you want it. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to be a guest. And Facebook groups are incredible. The podcast guest connection on Facebook, you should have no problem finding someone who wants to interview you there.
Yeah, for sure. I went into one of those podcast guest group things and kind of put my thing out there, but I must have, I don't know, maybe I didn't read the rules good. I don't think it ever got posted because I didn't even get any traction on there, but I'll definitely take another swipe at that. I love the idea of a little one pager to send out to people, because I feel like that's been my biggest hang back is, taking these big shots at, maybe less in asking for myself to be a guest, but in trying to get guests is it takes, half an hour to an hour to write out a very personal, email to a person about who you are, why you want to be on there. It takes a lot out of you, like, fuck, I wish I could be inviting guests on. Like, I have this huge list of guests I want to invite, but it takes so much out of you emotionally to invite somebody on. Right. And that's
why you
I find it
invite people that you really want to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. And it does kind of gate that, but then you're trying to balance the reasonability of them saying yes. So you don't want to, waste, an hour long drafting up an email to Joe Rogan, he's not going to get, right? Like that's a waste of your time, but then you have to balance and not sell yourself short too, where maybe you're not taking those swings at those guys that are of a size, right? Like if I would have thought, oh, the Coen brothers are award-winning authors, they're out of my league right now, I'm not going to reach out to them, then I would have missed that opportunity. So it's always that balancing act. And maybe here's another question I can ask you. One of the things I really find tough is finding the best medium to reach out to somebody, right? Like I feel like a lot of times there's a, something on their website, just like a contact me thing. And it's just a kind of form you fill out and you can write in there. Sometimes you'll find a PR email, sometimes DMs and social media. I've kind of tried them all and I'm not really sure. Would you recommend some over others, or is it just kind of a shock and effect? You got to get in all of them and make sure your voice gets heard over the din.
Yeah. It's a tricky thing. The guest booking facet of podcasting is its own job. Just like
for sure
is its own job, and just like making the content and being the host is its own job. So we wear these so many hats, but definitely reach out everywhere that you can. I'm not saying like reach out on all platforms at once, but if you email them and they don't write back, I DM people. LinkedIn is great. Twitter is good for stuff like that. Obviously Instagram. I've definitely booked some big YouTube influencers from DMs on Instagram. But I think email is a great first professional on-road if you can, but then LinkedIn, DMs, there's nothing wrong with it. That's kind of the name of the game right now, is everyone's online doing that. So there's also the different podcast guest networks and directories that you can sign up for. You can put your photo and your name in and your points, and you can reach out to people. And that way, those are all people who want to be podcast guests and they're actively touring. And then also authors are always looking, like just always needing PR. So you can kind of target certain kinds of people who are always going to need to. And then here, I recommend some solo episodes because it allows you to fill in the gaps should someone not come on. And that doesn't work for everyone's model if it's only a conversational model. But, for me, for podcasting, like I haven't done any solo episodes yet, or I should say. And I did one on Imposter Syndrome, but I felt too vulnerable to share it yet. But
Isn't that a bitch, eh?
It's going to wait a few months. But I have a few solo episodes in the bank in case something happens. I need to launch something. So I think that's a good strategy regardless.
Yeah. And I've done one solo episode so far, and it kind of, my idea of a solo episode was, with a producer, kind of, because my favorite, I have some kind of solo-ish podcasts that I like, and they always have like current events and a couple kind of actual word is escaping me, but kind of every week they'll have this segments, right? They have a couple segments and that, and I really like that idea, and I feel like it's something that I want to flesh out in the future, but we kind of went a little bit too far to the fly by the seat of our pants, kind of figured it out on the fly, and I think we need to do a little bit more work beforehand to make sure it was a little bit more structured. It was still a fun episode. It was still a lot of laughs with, I had one of my buddies there who didn't want to get on the mic, but I put one in front of him knowing that eventually once we got to one of the topics, he'd hop on. And then I had my producer who was awesome, or Brendan, I don't know if I can call him a producer. He kind of does everything. He's kind of a producer. And I've done a couple episodes with him, but I think you're right that if I got used to just getting in front of this myself and just talking for a decent length of time, I think that would really help, not only get better at the skill of podcasting, but also, like you say, take away that piece of dependency, because I think that's one of the things that's been a lot of stress about the podcast is the importance we put on consistency and not missing a week, and then the complete dependence on guests for the format that I picked, so that even though I have all this passion, I've done all this work, and I've asked so many people, if this Monday I almost missed a week because it was right till Friday and I had nobody lined up. I mean, I was going to twist the arm of, I could have got somebody from my family or my sister and I could have made them do it, but I had kind of all these backup plans. And then out of nowhere that Friday night, somebody said, hey, do you want to record? And sure enough, it lined up. Right. And I think I'd get so much stress over, is it going to work out and is it going to happen? I think that would take a lot of it away by having emergency lever to pull of just a solo episode I can do with myself. I think that's a great idea on that. Yeah, no, for sure.
And I like the segmented, kind of more edited and different phases of it, or maybe it's like multiple guests on one topic. That's fun. I want to explore that more. Or doing, another random thing is like best of compilations, or where you go back through and you pick out your favorite moments, and you can do solo casts that are actually just compilations of certain kind, or here's the best episodes on this, here's the best episodes on MMA, on sports, on current events. Right.
It's a great idea. And I think that's probably something you could start right now with me and Brendan could probably start, going through and assembling a best of, because you don't want to really, you just keep that as your backup, right? Yeah. All systems go. If you can't get a guest, boom, you throw that out, right? And you can keep adding to it. Sorry, go ahead.
You just throw a new intro on it.
Yeah, exactly. Just throw a new intro on it, right? Like every, no, that's a great idea, man. You're full of them. I see why you help other people with this, because you definitely have thought deeply on a lot of these things. I'm trying to stump you, but you keep working out of them quite well. I like it.
Yeah, I'm sure you got me.
So then, what? I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right way to word this. Do you think that podcasting and kind of what you've created with Podcast Farm, do you think that is something that you're going to do long term, or do you think it's do you think that is music your real passion? Do you think you'll ever go back to that? Like, where do you see yourself in maybe 5 or 10 years, kind of thinking for yourself, or is it too up in the air to say?
I'm really into visualizing and moving towards goals and planning. And then I also, like spiritually and existentially understanding kind of the transient nature of this world.
Yeah.
It's an interesting balance. Since I was little, I've been trying to like sell my toys to, my siblings' friends when I was like 5 and stuff. I was like, I love starting businesses. I love trying to sell my wares and connect people and help people sell their products. And so I think what I have realized with Podcast Farm is that it's really about it's like this mantra of amplifying what you love. I want to help creators, founders, and teachers amplify what they love in the best way possible. And, branding, business strategy, technical knowledge and workflow, audio editing, video editing, lighting, design, all that stuff, and communication strategy. I roll all that up into the work I do with people. And whether I'm making a podcast or a YouTube channel or a digital product or, a little sculpture out in the back with my niece, I just like to play. I just like to play with people and make beautiful things, inspiring things. So in some form or another, I'm going to be collaborating with folks on their businesses, on their projects. Whether or not it's only podcasts, I don't know. But Podcast Farm is definitely here to stay for a while.
Right. So to me, and not to put words in your mouth and stop me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like to me that you found the spirit of what you want to do and more the ethos of what it is you want to do. And currently it's manifesting and helping people with their podcasts. But as you have now found that idea, and it might shift forms and it might coalesce into different things, but the underpinnings of what it is probably something you're going to follow. Does that seem like a
totally? Yeah. Thanks for reflecting that. And I think I am staking a claim in the podcast land because of my lifelong, interest in audio and whatnot and music. And so I think that it's a beautiful format that is, like we've spoken about a lot on the episode so far, is just, it's a really pure format. And I believe in it. So I definitely feel like special towards this.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of the last thing I kind of want to ask you about, if somebody is creating a podcast and just say they reach that that hill where they have lots of downloads, they're very popular, they're starting to have people approach them to come onto their show. It's at that level where it is like the level of a TV show, right? I swear this has a point. I'm trying to get the question I'm trying to get to is, if you were to come up with maybe a list of 3 or 4 jobs of, if you're going to create your crew that is going to podcast with you, right? Like, maybe not to say this, but maybe they had outgrown something like the services you could provide. Like, this is somewhere they're already getting a couple 100,000 downloads. What are kind of the roles, right? You'd probably want an audio editor, a producer, a video editor. What do you think the key pillars of what a podcast needs to be on the most professional level and be successful? Because that's something I feel like I keep flip-flopping on. I think, oh, maybe I'll need somebody to do this. Maybe I'll need a micro content guy. Maybe I'll need this. And then
I see
how many different hats can these people wear, right? Could these 3 roles be one person? And then I could, expand into this. And I figured with your expertise, it'd be a good person to ask that question of. I don't know if I actually asked the question well enough.
I feel like I understand exactly what you're saying. You're asking if I could assemble a dream podcast production crew, what would their roles and responsibilities be?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's an awesome question. I haven't thought about it explicitly like that, but I've definitely thought about it for myself and what I need. I'd say the first thing that every podcast host needs, because some people just edit their own stuff. They do, and they like it. But a VA, right? A virtual assistant, some sort of executive right-hand person who is going to start to explore the other realms. And where I see, obviously, like, for instance, I pay people to edit my stuff, and I am a badass professional editor, and I do not want to edit my own stuff. I've never wanted to. And so I do hire that out. So I think having a really good editor is a must. I think having sort of like a chief of staff, a VA person who understands your mission, and they're going to help you interact with other maybe freelancers or do things. And that VA can be a guest researcher and a booker. Right. They can be a uploader, and I would call it a podcast manager. So you have a podcast producer, which might be recording, content creation, kind of like try this, don't do that, do this. And maybe they even do some editing, but the management is distribution, social media management, sending emails to the guests about their episode live, kind of following up with people, moving things, administrative stuff. So you want a VA that's going to be sort of like your manager, so that you're not just doing the uploads and the show notes and all the things, right? So you want those 2 people you can do a lot with, a VA and an editor. I wouldn't make them the same people, because then your VA can't do as much as you need. And the social media marketing part is so massive and takes so much time. The email marketing piece is massive, and just the management and distribution. So having a dedicated editor, and that's what they do, is great. And if you're doing video and audio, having a video audio editor, one is probably cheaper than trying to find two different people and double it up.
Right.
Yeah. Does that kind of answer the question? I wouldn't get a ton of people. I wouldn't have 4 or 5 people. I personally, if I could have anything, I would just have a really awesome VA and a really awesome editor.
Yeah. And you kind of nailed all the real pain points of the things that I wanted to, the things I'm struggling with the most now, right? Like someone to contact the guests and do kind of that legwork and make sure that people are there on time and doing some of the booking stuff and the uploading and that and the editing, right? Like you really answer that better than I probably could have hoped for. And that really gives me a lot of ideas going forward of what I kind of just building more, solidifying the vision I have for what I want to create, right? I feel like I have such a vision, but it is always morphing because of that lack of knowledge on some of these things of what it's actually going to look like and what it should look like if it's running well. And
can I actually add two more people, or potentially one person at the point where you either have your own products or services, or you want to just put some ad money behind it. Unless you want to go down the rabbit hole of advertising and Facebook and all that stuff, which I know how to do to some extent, but it takes a lot of management and you have to tweak things, test things and change things. Having an ads person to run ads for you. And simultaneously, you may have found a VA that is an amazing writer. They're great at email marketing. They're great at understanding your vision. They care about your project and they're like staying on top of everyone for you, but they do not know how to do social media growth. They just may not. It may be hard to find. So you may need someone who knows social media and knows advertising. So I would just change it to 3 potential people. So you have a VA who's sort of chief of staff, you have an editor, and you have some sort of advertising social media person who can help kind of expand.
Oh, that's perfect. And that's a very expansive knowledge. And I'm glad to hear you say that you keep it as minimal as possible, because I think the more cooks you get in the kitchen, the more the vision gets corrupted. That's where things start to go south. And I think that's what makes these podcasts so special. As you see, I mean, the biggest podcast in the world, Joe Rogan, he's got, 2 people that do it. One runs the cameras and does the editing on there, and then one does the video editing, right? And they pretty much, that's the extent of it. I'm sure he's got all his Hollywood other side of it, of his manager and his agent and all that stuff that probably also do a bit of that legwork too. But to hear him say it, they wanted nothing to do with it at the start. They kind of just got on later, and it was pretty much just him and Red Band that started all the things. So like you say, you don't need all of that, but it sure is nice to have. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to get from you, was just the large scale overview of it, because I think to me, then I just separate all those different roles that you mentioned within those people, isolate which ones are the most important to me first. And maybe that's something I can ask you, of all those roles and those ones that you expanded out, regardless of how many people and how many different hats they have to wear, of just the positions themselves that those 3 people would be filling. What do you think the first ones that you would venture off, like a guy like myself that's maybe at this point, what do you think would be? And I think this is also probably not something you can answer, because I think it's going to be different of what people struggle with themselves the most, and what where their own skills lack to need to be supplemented by somebody else. But just if you took your best guess at it, what do you think the most important roles that you'd want to bring on for a podcast to be successful earlier on?
Yeah. Well, I think having a podcast coach and a guide is something I've actually heard from a ton of hosts, is that if they had one, they would have started sooner. They would have skipped more mistakes, and they would have kept going. So I've heard that from many, many people. Having some other stakeholder, someone who cares about your vision, who believes in you, and who is ideally somewhat farther along in some aspect of what you're doing.
Right.
Beyond that, again, I think if it's kind of a toss up between the editor and the VA. If you can edit and it's not taking up so much of your time, or maybe your podcast doesn't need that much editing and you can do it, then keep doing that, because it's not going to be monthly cash coming out of your pocket for that. And the VA is going to just free up so much more time. And the secret to making over 10K a month is to automate and to have processes and to have someone else on your team. So you're not the only person doing it. You have to be able to delegate. And so probably I would go for a VA, because I can edit. If you don't know how to edit and that's seriously a hurdle, then go for an editor first. But if you're kind of talking about a scenario where you've reached a certain 10,000 downloads per episode, you're doing good, you already have a show, so you either already have an editor or you can do it, then I would say a VA.
Perfect. I really like that answer. One kind of a podcast host, I don't know what you called it, not a coach or a
Yeah.
mentor or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever word you want to use for that. That makes me happy for a lot of reasons. One, because that's something that I definitely see myself doing in the future. Is that like I do that for free. If somebody wanted to, I just love podcasting so much. If somebody I know is out there that wants to start one, I would be over the moon for free to just help them, even just so that they don't fall in the same pitfalls I went into, right? Just for that, for the good of the medium, I would love to do that. So that makes me happy. And then also, I think you're very much correct about having somebody else that cares about your vision, because I think one of the biggest turning points in this process for me was finding Brennan, who helps me do some of the editing, helps me with the YouTube channel and that. And no, it's helpful to have somebody just to take some of that pressure off and help get the YouTube channel. The actual physical work that he does is, amazingly helpful, and I can't speak enough to all it does for me and all that it frees up for me to think about. But what I noticed immediately was, just before we even discussed any of this, we just sat down over beers and I laid my vision out to him, and he took it seriously. He didn't laugh at it. He just, helped, instead of he laughed a little bit and said, "Oh, you're a crazy bastard, but hey, I'm in, like, you could do this and this," and helped actually be a sounding board for it and take it seriously, and allowed me to keep going, and we kind of pass it. The amount that just that small bit of someone taking it, everyone's taking it serious. I think when I do something, just the people around me, they know that I'm not a half-ass kind of guy. So they took it seriously, but I feel like nobody really took the vision seriously, maybe. And having that was so much, I'm just struggling. Even my words are escaping me right now, which doesn't often happen, but the impact that had on me was so powerful, just to realize that somebody else kind of sees, even if they don't see the whole picture, they at least see enough piece of it that I know I'm not crazy. And that felt so good. And just to have somebody that I can bounce these ideas off of, and have somebody else, I think you maybe didn't even, I think you hit it on the head when you said how important that was, but I think even it needs to be expanded on even further, because I think I didn't realize how much I was missing that until I had it. And now that I do, I think I'm looking for more people, right? Like, it's nice to have Brendan, but I want more. If I could bring on one more person to our team, so now it's me, Brendan, and someone else, that all see this vision and all can work together. And a lot of my outros of the episodes, I kind of throw in a little line of, hey, if anybody wants to come on board and help out with this podcast, you don't have to have any kind of skills. You don't need to know editing. You don't need to know anything. All you need to do is be able to, jump on board with the vision, and all those skills will come. We can teach you to edit. We can teach you to do social. We can teach you all these things, but it's about grabbing that vision. And that was probably why I wanted to have a sit down with you, to make sure that you understood what I was going for. If I am going to invest with podcast farming, go into some of these things, it's something that I need to understand. That is very important to me. Less so, also investing money, it's important. It's got to be, but that is second fiddle to that first point of making sure that you guys understand what I want to do and how I'm going with it, because I think if you don't have that, it's destined to fail. So I think I was very happy to hear you say that. And I think it's something that if anybody is starting a podcast, maybe sooner rather than later, you should look for that person, because it's going to have such an effect on your own mental health and against these struggles. And it just, that loneliness of being the only one, you against the world, just having someone else to take on that, to shoulder a bit of that, even if it's just the smallest bit, just is it's a breath of fresh air. And like I said, I was 25 episodes in, months into the podcast before I even realized I needed that. Right. And it kind of came out of nowhere. And Brendan was very gracious in offering his help. And that got to that point. But then right after I realized, oh shit, I was kind of dumb. I should have probably jumped on this a lot earlier. Right. So I don't know, maybe that's something, I don't know if you do already, but when you're working with people, I'd say that's probably something you should recommend to them earlier rather than later in the process, is finding that. And also, you probably can be that for people. And I think that is maybe something that with all the services that you guys provide, maybe just having that and to be able to jump on someone's vision, maybe that provides more than the services themselves at times, I would imagine.
Yeah, the moral support. And actually, can I illustrate a point for you?
Of course. I'd love that. That's why we got video.
Yeah. Can you can see this okay? I want to share with you something that'll illustrate this point in a really good way. So I want to share with you 3 jewels from the mystics of the East. We have the teacher. Can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
We have the teachings, and we have the community. And these 3 are always together, and they're always one. Even if the teacher departs.
Right.
These three are always together and are always one. Even if the teachings are obscured throughout time. These three are always together and are always one. Even if, like now with the lockdown, the community is obscured or isolated, and the teacher disappears from our vision, and the teachings are obscured by time. We must remember that these three things are always together and they're always one.
Wow. Well played. And very beautiful, very important. I love the message. And I think that's something that more people, if they sat and meditated with that, they would get a lot out of it even further than the explanation. But even past that is what a great reason to get more people to come to the YouTube channel instead of typically just listening to the episodes right here. If they want to understand that, you're gonna have to go and watch. So that's even better. Oh man, that's perfect.
Yeah, I thought in your intro you might want to tell them there's a special surprise for them if they wait around.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely tell them that you got to hop on the YouTube channel for the ending. What seemed to be pretty good with your hands, or where did you pick that up along the road?
I'm a magician. I'm a sleight of hand magician. I study magic, and I've taught magic to elementary schoolers, and I love magic. I love sleight of hand. I love performance arts, and I love to tell stories with some visual magic.
Yeah. Where did which came first, music or magic?
It's interesting. I think I actually I think I was allowed to do magic before my dad let me in the studio. So
fair enough.
Magic, but I took I was more interested in music, like focused first, and magic came after that. But yeah, they've been in tandem. But music's more my thing. But magic is becoming, especially with speaking, magic is becoming more useful to illustrate certain points.
What magic is always something that's been interesting to me, and I'm curious what lessons just having magic be part of your journey with all the other things while chasing your musical dreams and chasing these podcast dreams and stuff. What lessons has working on your craft of magic and sleight of hand taught you along the way that maybe you wouldn't have known otherwise or wouldn't have learned otherwise?
Oh, that's a great question. Magic is a really fascinating art form. A lot of people get this weird impression of it that it's trying to just make a fool out of all these people. You're trying to trick them and you got to figure out the trick. And for me, magic is about the art of astonishment. Magic is about trying to give a gift of blowing someone's mind, of back to that childhood wonder of anything's possible. And part of the problem with magic is that it can just be hard to set that up nicely. It's very much like, hey, try and catch me, or I'm going to prove you wrong. And different magicians perform differently. My teacher, Jeff McBride, he's one of the world's greatest magicians. And he talks about using stories to distance the audience from the impact or the slap of being hit with a trick. Right. So some of the things I've learned from magic is how to connect with people and how to make sure that my message is coming across how I want. Because in magic, you're showing one thing and having something else happen, or it's misdirection. Is the hand quicker than the eye? Is the eye, can the eye see it? So learning how to control my expression, or learning how to manage a conversation, not in a manipulative way, just in a way to make the effect as beautiful as possible for the audience member. It makes you think just like an inventor. To how do you make a magic effect happen? You have to make it happen somehow, and there's a thought process that goes into it that is super creative and beautiful. And so problem solving and just like, so some way it's possible. And it also has just taught me that humans are are prone to errors in perception, like
Yeah.
super seriously.
And really showing you where those errors are and how to
I know where
and
they are and how to
yeah.
use them, and that's interesting and humbling.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting thing. That's something that I had heard when I hear people speak about magic. They always talk about when they're learning a new trick or something. It's often start, like you said, it starts at the end of, I want to do this. I want this effect, and then they work backwards through how to make that happen, right? And it's just interesting. I feel like so many people don't. They have whatever taboos in their head that stop them from thinking deeply about magic, and I think that's with a lot of things where there's a lot more to it, but people just have whatever story, whatever narrative that allows them not to, right? That they just think, oh, people who do magic are childish or whatever it is, whatever that narrative they have that stops them dead there so they don't go any further with it. But I love that about so many things when you can take those other steps. And there's always nuggets there. There's always gold when you follow that line of reasoning, right? If you go down that path, because if it's something that is powerful enough that people are going to be that passionate about it, like magic, like podcasts, like music, like any of these things, there's going to be something to it. And there's going to be something to it deeper than where you thought it was, right? If you've had anything that's preventing you from really sitting with it and going deeper with it, you're not ever going to get to the full magnitude of what it is and what that truth is. And I think it's interesting that you're drawn to podcasts and magic, because in hearing your description of magic, a word I could have inserted at any point, I chose not to, was pure, right? It's a pure art form. When you're talking about what you're giving to someone, you're giving that gift of wonder in a very pure way, because just like comedy too, I think laughter is very much this way. It's automatic. You can't stop yourself. When someone hits you with a real joke, even if it's something you shouldn't laugh at, it comes out, right? And same with that wonder of a good magic trick. It's pure, right? And I think that's in a very different way, but it's the same soul of the thing. Of that's what podcast is that it's that pure thing that you can recognize it when you see it. It's way more obvious when it's laughter or when it's that awe. But I think there's also another thing of just that truth that can come out in a podcast. It's just two people, you hear them talk for 3 hours and you see the entire mechanizations of how that conversation, the weaves that it took to get to this point, and they stumble upon together this truth about humans or about something, and it just rings so true to you because you can feel it and you went along that path and you know exactly how they got there. Yeah. And especially when it's a podcast that you followed for a while, so you know kind of what their life has built them up to that point to get them to that point, and you get to be part of that truth. And I feel like that awe and that laughter and that truth are those things that you don't get a lot in life. And I feel like when you find something like a podcast or a magician or a comedian, they dedicate their whole life to that elusive thing and to finding that and to do that. And there's something special about it.
Yeah, that's so well said. The magic without a trick is magic, and magic happens when you wake up in the morning and you see the sunlight, or when you wake up in the morning at all. Happens when we have a good conversation. Astonishment happens when we feel deeply connected to something more than ourselves, and that can happen in anything. So I think that, circling back, that's probably one of the biggest things, is it's taught me to see magic in more places than I used to, right? And like even now, like just having such a great conversation with you, being here is a magical moment. And I encourage people to play with magic in their own way. You don't have to do much. You don't have to trick people. You can, simple things, writing people a note and handing it to them is a magic trick. It's a surprise. Yeah. Christmas is a magic thing. It's, you give people these magic gift surprises. That's what it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I think I have a million more questions, but I think that's probably as beautiful a spot to end it as we could ever find. And I think if I take it any further, I'll just end up messing it up. So is there anything that I missed? Anything important that you guys do, a message you got across, anything that we can plug, anything that we can get a message out to my small little audience here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm really excited about my 6-week podcast launch program called Amplify What You Love. And so if anyone is all curious about either launching a brand or a podcast, I highly encourage you to go to my website. I'm sure we can put the link in the show notes or something, but it's podcast-farm.com/apply. And you can apply for a strategy session with me, and we can chat about your idea. And my goal is to try and give you as much value as possible for free in that hour. And if we're a good fit to work together, maybe we will.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's kind of how we got started. That's how we got introduced, was doing something like that. And this is where it ended up. And that was honestly one of my favorite conversations I've had the entire time. It was so much fun, and can't thank you enough for coming on. And I think definitely you'll be on in the future if you're willing, because I think we'll be both very far future down the path. And look at that timing. The camera ends right at the end. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thanks for having me.
Sir,
It's been amazing.
thank you.
With you.
Awesome. All right. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, my friend. That was so much fun.
That was so much fun. That's great timing there at the end. Thanks for catching that was going to happen here. I'll put my other video.
Hey, that's what I do, baby.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Oh, man. That was really fun, man. That's the first long form interview that I've gotten to
be
a guest on. And that was really, really great to just go deep.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun to kind of take it to the other levels, right? It's always fun to do the quick ones too, and kind of hit the high points. But I think there's something special about just going that next step deeper and just see where you stumble upon. Fuck, I wish I would have known more about the magic before. I would have had a million questions, but that just means I got to have you on again in the future here.
Yeah, well, and I was thinking it would be great to get you on, be on air, interview you about your journey
anytime
and stuff, and maybe we can schedule something for February or something.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever you want. And that's the other thing too. I something that I've been trying to tell people too, like because I do think I would be such a good guest on shows that like and I love it so much. I would do it whenever, just to be on standby. You know, somebody jams out on you, I'll step in. I'll go on as a guest whenever.
Yeah, but you're on the guest list. You're on the
Oh, for sure. I mean that too. I mean that's great. But I mean even on top of that too, right? Like I feel like everyone I want to connect with that has a podcast, I just want to tell them, hey, whenever someone jams out on you, I got lots of time.
That's cool, man. That's almost like a service in itself, right? Like a podcast emergency call list.
Yeah.
That's really
man.
I love your enthusiasm around podcasting, man. I have that too, and I feel like I burn my girlfriend out sometimes talking about podcasting all the time.
Yeah, same here.
So it's great to connect with you and get to just like share enthusiasm about it and share ideas. And I love what you're working on, man. You have such a great mood and mission with it, and I can tell you're gonna crush it.
Yeah, I don't tell that to a lot of people, but I have that same feeling I feel like about myself. You know, it's that balance of balancing that cockiness and that assuredness in myself of what it's going to be with, making sure I still do the hard work. But definitely it's something that and that's what's so tough about reaching out to guests and stuff. And, you kind of got to put yourself, because I believe so much that it's going to be something great, and that, not that I'm doing somebody a favor, but I feel like it's, it may not look like it yet, but eventually it's going to be something really good, to be on here and be one of the first people that are part of it. Right. So
I totally agree. I think that you're building a real platform here, and, by taking some time to present it well with that one sheet I was talking to you about, with
that's a great idea.
Website and a landing page, like those little things really communicate massive amounts to the guest of like, okay, this person's totally doing this for real. And it's not expensive. It's easy to throw that stuff together.
Yeah, I was just talking to Brendan actually before this episode about getting my website actually up and running and coming up with a couple pages, because he's built, that's his actual gig, is he's built websites forever. So we're going to get started on that right away, because I think that is probably one of the biggest things holding me back is, having a good website that doesn't just direct to the YouTube page. It actually has some content on it and a little bit about me, and then I don't have to type that up in every email of them. They can go to the site and see it and that. So I think
you kind of alluded to, you're really interested in becoming a podcast producer for people and guide and helping them through, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That is awesome. And I mean, it's lucrative, and it, whether you're doing editing or production or guesting or consulting, it's really lucrative. And I feel like my model that I'm doing would be a really good model for you. Like for monetizing your show, and also for transitioning into that part of your career. Sort of done with you coursey. It's like you have a course, but you're giving your time as well, so you get the benefit of both, and you build out worksheets and stuff. I feel like that would be a really good model for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of something that's one area I haven't really thought to, is actually how I would, I know I could do it. And I feel like leadership has always been something that I've excelled at, right? In sports and stuff. I was always that guy on the team that was, the captain and getting everyone fired up. And that was always like a role that I could fill. I just have to figure out a way. And like you say, just finding a good, I don't know what the right word is, but, a good format for bringing that through and making sure that it's, repeatable and they're getting something out of it. I think that'd be a huge a huge benefit.
It's definitely.
Yeah. Well, if you ever need someone, if you think my skills would help with you guys, if you have someone, a podcast that's coming up, do you think I'd be a good fit just to, help coach or whatever? I'm down to help you guys out too. If you think that it'd be a good match.
No, I have big plans for it. I want to get bigger, have multiple coaches, have multiple programs, and I want to grow this thing for sure. So in the network with like guest exchange and stuff, I want to be able to help everyone out. So I'll also send people your way if I think they'd be a good guest.
Awesome. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Really appreciate that. And and I'll guest on anybody's. I think I can, I have such a broad range of what I like and what I'm into that I feel like I can go on any show and talk about anything.
Stuff, and then like sports team stuff, and then it was great. It was awesome, man. I'm looking forward to diving in deeper to the rest of your episodes too. And
for sure.
Space.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everything you've done. I learned a ton and had a lot of fun doing it. And I'm really excited about that micro content stuff. I think that's something that's been one of the biggest things gating me, especially with the length of episodes. So I think once I get that rocking and rolling, it's going to be a big step forward. So I'm excited for that.
We're going to take care of you with that. We're going to do a real nice job. And I'm going to send you my magnetic marketing strategy marketing plan that I've just been putting together for my program. And I'll throw that in there. And just so you kind of see one suggestion for how you can stretch every episode as far as possible.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I would really appreciate that. And I think, definitely we got something good lined up to work forward in the future. Because I think that's something that I'm looking forward to. I think we just need to do that. That was the first step. Make sure you're not a crazy person. Make sure I'm not a crazy person. Then off to the races.
Sounds good, man. I'll be in touch with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Thanks for having me on. It's a real honor.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
All right. Take care, Nick.
All right. Talk to you later. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that episode. Very fun one for me. I think selfishly, I learned so much about what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, small things I can change to make it better for you guys. So hopefully in the next coming weeks, you start to see me put some of these things in action. Hopefully that'll help me get some bigger guests, get to be a guest on some other shows. I'm guesting on KLees podcast here this week, so that's exciting too. Starting to bring my 2021 resolution of getting on more podcasts as a guest to fruition already. Follow me on the social medias, Twitter and Instagram. Like I said in the intro, tell a friend. I don't think there's a better episode than this to re-up my plea to anybody out there that is listening, that likes what they're hearing on this podcast and wants to come on board to help out and join the team. We have a million different roles. If you've never touched a computer in your life, if you've never, listened to any other podcast than this, you don't need any skills. You don't need anything. You just need to be willing to work and listen. And more importantly than that is just believe in what we're doing here. And that's what I'm waiting for. I know the longer I do this podcast, the more people are going to listen to it, and it's going to strike upon some people. You could be listening right now where it really resonates with you and you think you can, understand what we're going for here. That's the only prerequisite, is to have that understanding. So first step to that is just reaching out to me and having a conversation, and we'll talk about it, and we can, talk about the vision of what I want to do for this. And it seems like you understand that. We're off to the races, and I think it'll be a pretty successful move. I have a lot of belief in myself and what I'm going to do with this. And I think it's just kind of a gamble that somebody's going to have to take if they believe in that too, and they want to come on board. I think it'll pay off pretty fruitfully in the long run, but you're going to have to trust me on that. So other than that, hope you guys have an awesome week. I know things are looking crazy, but tides are turning. People are waking up. People are becoming more, looking up their own information, not just taking everything how it's portrayed to them. And I think that's the start of some positivity. So, there's some good things on the rise, and don't give up hope. Everything's going to be all right, and we're going to get through this thing. So I'll see you guys next week, and hope you liked it.